You're on. Okay. Oh, like everybody to make sure your mic is on. Press the button there. Make sure the little light turns green. And you got to be fairly close to the mic to make sure it's picking up properly, so you can scoot it closer to you, or you can lean into it.
I have a pretty deep voice. Somebody else's mic will probably pick mine up.
You got to think like a rock star and get it real close.
Yeah. Nobody will want to use it after me. I get too close. Okay, do we have any public comment? Anybody want to introduce themselves? Anybody up here? Anybody? Well, it's not a new one, but it's the first time we've seen him.
I'm here. Matt McGarrah, South Walton Turtle Watch. I'm present. I'll be here from here on out. So.
Welcome, Matt.
Yes, thank you.
First item, approval of the last meeting's minutes. We need a motion for that. We have a motion? We have a motion. I have a second. And a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Next item is new business. Can I say something first before?
Yeah.
We got a real bad hurricane barreling down on North Carolina. Everybody keep them in your thoughts and prayers. I brought the insert from Hurricane Opal. I want to pass it around, let everybody look at it. Wow. For those that were here, just refresh your memory.
Wow.
For those that weren't,
Yeah.
that's could be what's in store. Keep in mind though, that hit in Navarre. If we get a direct hit, it's going to be a lot worse than that.
Yeah.
That was pretty bad.
So that's the insert from the paper in 1995?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was about a week after the storm because the roads were just all clogged with debris and everything.
Yeah.
And they put that in the newspaper.
Yeah.
A lot of Destin stuff, a lot of South Walton.
Yeah.
I mean, all the bridges were damaged. All
Yeah.
the Dune Lake bridges, they all had to be replaced.
Yep.
I mean, the roads were washed out. Old 98 just, I mean, it had debris and sand probably 2 feet high.
Yeah.
It was awful.
Yeah, across the Okaloosa Island, it was just bare.
Oh, yeah, Okaloosa Island was terrible, you know. Fort Walton, you know, the harbor, Destin Harbor. I mean, it breached Noriego Point.
Yeah.
You know, the boathouse basically was washed up on the bluff. All the trusses were washed up. And,
Wow.
I mean, all the restaurants, you know, they had cookouts for volunteers. Everybody went down there and pulled up boards and fixed things, and all their food was spoiling, so they had big cookouts, and everybody came together and helped fix things. And nowadays, I kind of bring this up because there's a lot of division in our community now, and you know, a lot of for those that watched the meeting on Saturday, we all came together. We were really close community back then, and we're not that close now. So I hope we can come together before something like this happens to us.
10-4.
So let's move on.
Okay.
New business.
John, I'd like to say something before we get started on this new business. So every year we go through this code revision process. We take the opportunity with this committee, the Destination Improvement Committee, which is similar to this committee, is an advisory committee to the TDC. And then we also have a couple of public workshops. We have a postseason vending workshop scheduled for September 20th at 10 a.m. Is that right? Yeah, 10 a.m. And then a September 25th is a public workshop at 5 p.m. Both those meetings are in this room, and it's another opportunity for, of course, the vendor meeting is primarily geared towards vendor input, but it's an open public meeting, so anybody can come to it. And then the public workshop is exactly that, opportunity for the general public to come in and offer up recommendations to really beach management. It's not just vendor code, but all of the beach code that's contained in Chapter 22. And so, like I say, every year we go through this, and so today's our opportunity as a committee to develop possible recommendations. And if you feel comfortable today, you can actually, we can go through it offer up recommendations, we can listen to the public, and then we can make a list of them and we can vote on them today if you would like, and then move that forward. As you know, all of the recommendations that get voted on move forward with their approval or not approval status. I think it's important that whatever ideas are brought up move forward regardless of their status. It's not since we're not an approval board, we're an advisory board. That's the other reason. So, today's meeting might be a little bit longer, but I think if we can get through the first part of it by offering up recommendations, I'll be taking down the notes for it, and then we can turn right back around and bring them up as an item each, and the board can then cast their vote if they'd like to. If not, we can bring them up and think about them for 2 months and vote on them at the next meeting. So our schedule is we always try to get these done at the end of the year, but in past years, these items have carried on into the first of the next year before they actually got decided on by the BCC. So the BCC meets every other week. The second and fourth Tuesdays of the month. Our TDC meeting next one is October 3rd or 2nd? October 2nd. And so the progression is from this board to the TDC, and then we combine this board's recommendations and their approval status with the public workshop recommendations, and then our code enforcement data that we collect throughout the year. And I put together what I call my annual report that has all this in it, and TDC then considers it and moves it forward to the BCC. So just want y'all to be aware of that. Any questions or comments on that?
Yeah, is there anything that the beach management wanted to add? I didn't see any red or anything in here.
No, like I say, this is...
This is for us to...
Right.
Okay.
So, I would see this...
Yeah, do we want to...
May I?
Please.
Okay. I attended a meeting last night of the South Walton Community Council, and while they did not come up with recommendations that they voted on or anything, they'll do that at a later meeting, they did offer up problems or issues and then some solutions that I guess some group of them had maybe come up with. And one of the issues they identified was just how to improve code enforcement. I'm not going to go to that one at this point, but the beach vendor issue, they feel, and I think most of us agree, no offense, Philip, that this is a major irritant to visitors and residents alike. They said the current model is not working and major restructuring is needed. Empty chairs and chairs aligned at the water's edge are the biggest issue, along with storage of equipment on the beach. And they've identified several things, including limiting permits, requiring business license and background checks on vendors, implementing service contracts with beach vendors to limit operations at public accesses to 1 or 2 vendors, charge the selected vendors a percentage of revenue, eliminate early morning setups, committing to having an attendant on site, doing first come, first serve, and then the county possibly assuming the vendor operations at public accesses in particular. I'm bringing these forward. I think first come, first serve makes lots and lots of sense. I don't know that I'm qualified since I'm not a beach vendor. I don't necessarily know all the things they have to contend with. But I think the first come, first serve in particular would be a really helpful option, because then nobody gets a priority spot until they actually show up at the beach. And reserving the beach, whether it's by vendors, whether it's by the residents, whether it's by the public, has created a lot of this animosity, because there's stuff on the beach with no people there, whether that's chairs or whether that's tents and canopies or that sort of thing. So that's one that I think is worthy of trying to see if the Beach Vendor Coalition could come up with some ideas on how to make that work. You know, another thing that I've heard suggested that was not on here is that the beach vendors, instead of having the first tier closest to the water, you know, since we have this third kind of thing going on with the tents, if the tents are the seaward third of the dry sand, then the vendors could be the middle tier of the dry sand, and the first tier nearest the water could be literally first come, first served by, you know, the public, the residents and the tourists. So those are my suggestions for this moment anyway.
The public's pretty bad about putting their chairs up too. They run out at 6 o'clock in the morning, throw their chairs up, and then go back and
Yeah. Well,
have breakfast and.
that's why I think the whole preset idea
So is there-
needs to go.
Can I say something? The biggest complaints that I am hearing, and I had family here this weekend that was not staying with me, they were staying in a friend's condo. And their issue, and the issue that I'm hearing from a lot of people, is that they specifically were told by the vendor, you can only sit in this area, nowhere else. And they had chairs lined up the whole length of the beach, and they were all said reserved, but they were all vacant. Only 2 of them out of like 100 sets were even used, but they were told they couldn't go in front of them, and they only had to stay in this one area. Now, this was not a public beach, it's private. So they only went to the beach one of the days that they were here. The rest of the days, you know, they did other things because it was not enjoyable for them at all. But I'm hearing that from more and more people, is that I can't even get near the water because these chairs are lined up and there's no one in them.
Right.
I don't know how you would, with beach vendors, you could control first come, first serve, but I don't know how you would police people that are going down and setting up the tents at, you know, immediately at that moment that they can in the morning, which is another huge problem, is that people are complaining that the vendors are taking that stuff and throwing it to the side as if it's trash that's been left there, even though it was set up, and then setting up their chairs. So you got both sides opposing, but how do you police that, you know?
Was the second situation you were explaining, was that also on what would be considered private beach?
Yes,
Okay.
not public.
What
Right.
private beach was this?
The private beach this weekend was Topsail.
The actual condo.
Yeah. So, you know, Debbie, what you're describing there is more than a vendor problem. Because the vendors that have specific place permits have associated contracts with that property owner and the agreement, so they have an agreement of how they're going to set up. And so I'm assuming that a lot of that agreement is how many guests they have in their resort community. And I'm also understanding that vendors are also being used as pseudo security guards to a certain extent. And so, you know, I don't think that particular problem is solved by a vendor associated code, and I really don't. We can certainly talk about it, but over the last couple of years, there's been a progression of segregating the vendor codes associated with private property and public property. And the reason is if you have private property, we've learned to understand that people do have private property to the main high water line, and that they're in business to service their gas and to make money. And so.
Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
I know when I mentioned this last night, it didn't sound like this was necessarily doable, but I'd love to see our legal explore whether the, you know, shoreline that's held in the public trust, if just no setups whatsoever can be allowed in that, whether they're beach vendors, whether they're the public. Not that people can't play with their children and all that, like I mentioned last night, but that area, as I understand it, was really designed for traversing. And maybe that's not accurate, but if it is, then it'd be like somebody closing off sidewalk routinely by putting stuff all over it. And it just seems to me that that's an option worth exploring, that just says you cannot block that area because it's designed to be traversed.
Right. And I think that the legal department doesn't need to define for us what is held in the public trust doctrine. The big problem is for anybody, be it user, visitor, or code enforcement, determine where that line is. And once again, you know, the reason that people set up close to the water's edge is to keep somebody else from setting up in front of them.
Yeah.
And so I think the way we would have to approach that is, first, some sort of equipment that can quickly and easily determine where that line is. That, say at the first of the year, like, you know, what we're talking about is a mean high water line survey on beaches that have a mean high water line, and then ECL survey on those beaches. And then, you know, we could establish those at the first of the year, and they could be, that would be fairly consistent throughout the year. It may change some, but at least that way,
You
there
could put
could
some
be.
monumentation on the beach or something? But-
Well, I don't see how you don't have some kind of you know, marker, okay? I don't, you know, I don't want to advocate concrete, you know, monuments or, you know, 6-inch tip piles down there. It would be better if there was, I mean, you know, that section of the beach is very dynamic. And so how do you do that? Obviously.
Well, I mean, I think we can all agree that the wet sand is below the mean high water line, and it fluctuates a little bit, but, I mean, that is below it, so that's.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, I think that's our best measurement.
Yeah.
You know, we don't want flags out on our beach every 100 feet or so.
No,
So the
I
rule-
don't
You know,
think we do,
The
but,
rule last year that was adopted was 15 feet
Yeah.
for vendors on the public beaches.
mhm.
Sure, can someone break that rule? But I feel like, in general, on public beaches, that has been abided by much more than in the past. That rule almost passed on private property, but it did not at the last second, correct?
Right.
So the thing is, you know, a Rosemary Beach or a private condo, they can set up as close as they want per the current rules. And they do often do that, but on public beaches, it is back. So there, again, in what Miss Debbie said, this is two different animals here. There's a public beach and there's a private beach. And I think Mr. Bryan would agree that there's a lot of things that we cannot do with a code revision on private beach. I mean, you get into customary use. The private property says we can do what we want, it's our property. So that's two completely different issues.
Yeah. Well,
It creates a lot of confusion, though.
Well, back to what Lisa was talking about is that demarcation between public property and state of Florida property that is considered the public trust doctrine. Okay, so that's all the water or the land seaward of the mean high water line and or erosion control line. And it has a description that is very similar to customary use in that it can be used by the people of the public for swimming, fishing, sunbathing, enjoying the beach and various other recreational ways and all that. And there's actually verbiage of having adequate access to that area. And but once again, but the problem is how do we determine that line at any given moment when there is a confrontation of who has the right to be there, okay? Another problem that comes into that is that the people that live adjacent to a gulf have certain littoral rights, and those rights are basically centered around their unrestricted view of that body of water, their right of entry to that body of water not being impeded, and all that. And so there would be an argument that the people that live adjacent to it, in other words, that their southern boundary is the main high water line, even though you as general public have certain rights to that water, they also have certain rights to that area seaward of the main high water line. And so then you get into an argument of, okay, I understand where the public trust is, and I understand that you as general public have a right to be there, but just because I'm a property owner doesn't mean I'm not a member of the general public, and I have a right to be there, and I actually have certain littoral rights that give me a little bit of advantage over you. See what I'm saying? Is everybody familiar with littoral rights? I mean, you know, they're fairly vague and broad when you look up a definition of them, but those two definitions I gave are the root of it. And so what do we do? I mean, once again, it comes down to code enforcement. But code enforcement has to have the mechanisms to be able to say, here's the line, and everybody has to have an understanding, or there has to be a code that has certain verbiage in it that says we can ask you to do this, or change this behavior, or this is the behaviors that are allowed. You know what I'm saying? You know, in a perfect world, everybody would understand that, man, I need to set my chairs up, you know, 15 or 20 feet from the water's edge, and other people didn't understand that I can't go set up in front of those chairs that have obviously established their waterfront seat for that day. But we know that doesn't happen. So anyway.
Somebody go.
I apologize. My name is Todd Rower.
Come up with the thing.
Meeting.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the process is.
Come on up.
Todd, this is the process. So, public forum, chairman, you know, operates under Robert Rules of Order, and he'll recognize people to speak. And you come to the podium, state your name, and, you know.
Roark, R-O-A-R-K. I'm a resident of 300 Cassim Garden Circle in Santa Rosa Beach. My wife and I moved here 2.5 years ago. I exited a 34-year career in corporate America and 7.5 years in the military. So I've been following structure for my entire life. I have, you know, as I led people and led organizations, I followed one rule. I tried to make my problem someone else's problem. That's the way I solve problems. Problems get solved when there's someone else's problem. And I've said many times on Facebook, it's got to be true, right? So I'm trying to figure out how South Walton County and Walton County specifically operates. So I am out there on social media, and I've started to voice my opinion, sometimes too much. But the problem today is, to me, is the vendor issue. It's a vendor issue. The vendors need to solve the problem, or we eliminate the vendor. We do not need a vendor. We don't need beach chairs. We don't need umbrellas. We need the beach. We need the people to be happy, enjoying life. When I first started coming down here 20 years ago, and the reason I moved here is it felt like Mayberry. I loved it. I'm from Chickamauga, Georgia. You can't be more southern than Chickamauga, Georgia. It's right below Chattanooga, Tennessee. We have one red light, one school, one doctor. Things were great. It was Mayberry. And I love that about this community, that everyone was happy when we came down here. I suffer from PTSD. I moved here specifically because I suffer from PTSD. And I've been under more stress in the last 3.5 months than I ever, well, I can't say that, not in the last 10 years, but it's just the community's broken right now. We have to solve. And what I heard Saturday is the vast majority of the homeowners that spoke specifically pointed out issues with the vendors. We have a vendor problem. We have to solve it. My thing is to bring all the vendors together and tell them to solve the problem. If they can't solve their problem, we don't need the vendor. That's just we don't need it. At the end of the day, you can go to Walmart for $5 and buy a chair. I own rental properties. I provide chairs. I'll carry them down there for my guests if they need it.
When we started these beach rules and the vendor issues and stuff a couple of years ago, I sort of had the same opinion that we really didn't need the vendors. I didn't like the beach chairs. I don't like the boxes at the toe of the dune and stuff. But then it was brought to my attention in these meetings by the vendors that at some point it's a little bit of a conservation issue, because we've all seen on checkout day, you know, the tons of beach chairs at the trash cans. They'll use them they go to Walmart, they'll use them for a week, and they leave them at the trash can, and we gotta throw them away. So that fills up our landfills and stuff. So the beach chairs, or the vendors providing these beach chairs, do provide a valuable service to our community. That was kind of introduced to me just recently. So I kind of have a different point of view for the vendors. They do have a good position in the community. They are part of the problem right now, and we do need to fix the problem, and they do need to be part of the solution. But they do have a big part in our community.
I just wanted to point out, and I'm part of South Walton Turtle Watch, so by no means am I always on the vendor side, but I get every violation sent to me from every volunteer walker for the whole stretch of beach. So I see me more than you as far as beach issues. I get every text message. And some are vendors, and a lot of them are public, leaving tents, leaving trash, digging holes. Here's the issue is, when you call in the public, I can't really do anything about it. I can't track that person down. What he's saying, when it's a vendor, I can call Dave at LBB directly, say, Dave, your guys have done this, and Dave responds back pretty quickly and rectifies the issue. So it actually sometimes helps. I know who to go to, I know who to talk to. So I'm not saying we don't have a vendor issue. I don't think it's just a vendor issue.
No, it's a people
I've seen the
stupidity
public
problem.
abuse the beach a ton, and tents everywhere, and we can't, it's almost impossible to do anything to them.
Yeah.
But the vendors are very easy to monitor.
Yeah, you have to control the people. In the Army, we had a regulation to how to go pee. I mean, there's a certain way to do it. So we told them how to do it. I'll take the chairs, I'll go pick them up off the beach and I'll resell them. I'll resell them every single week. I'll sell that $5 chair 100 times. So there is a way around it. If that's the issue, if chairs are being left at the foot of the dune at the stairwell, I'll go
There's a
collect
lot
the
of
chairs and I'll
debris.
resell them.
There's a lot of chairs and debris left
Yeah.
right now with the vendors.
Even
I mean,
with-
without them, it would be, I mean, the
But-
trash is almost overwhelming in itself.
Brian, how much are you picking up? How many pounds?
Last year, we picked up 20,000 items of Leave No Trace. And
And-
that was just our collection of the nightly Leave No Trace. We picked up probably equal that of discarded chairs, tents, whatever, at the toe of the dune, that people leave at the end of the week.
And we have a huge recycling issue, and we're having to stockpile our recycling, which is all sorted, but it's stockpiled.
Mhm.
And we don't have anybody to sell it to right now, so we're working through those issues. It's gonna be a 10-year plan before we get to where we should be, and this is a huge, I have to agree that the debris is a huge issue, and there's not, there was a business that, would let you bring their stuff, the stuff you didn't use, but you'd only have these people's attention for about 4 days. So you don't get their attention long enough for them to know where to drop this stuff off, where to leave this stuff that can be recycled and used the next week for someone else. Then when you do that, then you've got the people they're saying you're hurting their business because people are using reused stuff and they're not buying anything. You got this whole cycle going, But I definitely agree that the vendors do provide great help with the recycling issue that we have in Walton County.
We don't allow the vendors to set up like early setups. We allow them to carry on and carry off to deliver to the individual. So the vendors do supply a service, but their service is more like a butler service. So they can't go out there at 8 o'clock in the morning and set up and put a tag on it, this goes for this person. The person has to be there to receive it,
Where's that at?
the state parks.
Oh, the state parks.
And
So
A lot
our
of
rule
people
is a little
reserve their
different,
chairs
and then
and don't even
with
use
the garbage, we ask everybody to carry on and carry off. We don't have any garbage left on the beach by the guest. I mean, occasionally somebody's gonna, but we don't allow it, that's not part, so
So, I mean, I don't know
at
why
that
we can't
point,
follow-
they're littering is the way we look at it.
Why can't we follow that model? Why can't we just?
Well, I agree with that model, the carry on and carry off, no vending from the beach. I think that there should be either
This
from
is
a
an
brick and-
unbelievable volunteer community. I've never seen the Turtle Watch and the Ambassador Program and people just picking up trash. Jordan Crowder and Gulf Place started a Facebook site that just publicizes, pick up the trash, and can I collect more than the next guy?
And
So this is an unbelievable community around volunteerism.
There's a lot of stuff that goes on Facebook that you see people saying they're doing, they're not doing.
Well, I know that, but but I do believe in people for the most part want to do the right thing.
Right, I do applaud our community for the amount of cleanup they do, because I see them firsthand out there, and they do a lot of cleanup.
And my
They
wife,
carry the stuff up, they put it in the trash cans, they're not afraid to get their hands dirty.
sorry, I'm hard of hearing when there's something else. My wife is a beach ambassador. I was scheduled to take the training, but I was out of town, so I haven't taken it yet. But it's an unbelievable community around volunteerism and the environment, and people really care. The turtles, uh, the oats, all the other stuff. So I just think if you engage, if the vendors realize it's their problem to solve, it's going to get solved. At the end of the day, I still don't see.
I think it's all of our problem, and that's pretty much what we've been doing here, trying to come up with rules to try to solve the
I
problem.
really like the state.
We're all volunteers here.
Yeah, I
you
know.
So,
But anyway,
all right. Well,
I appreciate.
Thanks
the
a
time.
lot.
Thank
I
you.
wanted
Appreciate
to
you.
address you, first of all, thank you for your service in the military, and all you've done. I am a beach vendor, and I'm always consistently caught in a difficult place. I'm a part of this community. I've lived here since '97. Moved here in the 4th grade. I'm 30 years old now, raising a family here, trying to be an entrepreneur. I would like to think that you could ask anybody in this room, am I reasonable and do I care about this community? And I hope that they would say yes, and I try to take both sides of the coin. The main problem we have is we are a tourism industry that is absolutely exploded, okay? Thanks to having wonderful beaches, wonderful accommodations, 38.com, Visit South Walton, everyone has blown this place up that now we have the animal that we have. And we as vendors, and I try to say this consistently, is I wish, just like when you were in corporate America, I wish we could create the demand for whatever product we're selling, okay? For a beach chair on a beach. The only way I get a beach chair on a beach is because they want the service, because they paid so much money to come stay in their super nice house, and they're not going to Walmart and they're not going to carry their chair down to the beach. Therefore, they call me or they call another vendor to get their sets. I then understand that because it's what the tourists want, that we are now stuck in a situation that can become better. And I do want you to know, if anything in this meeting, that we as vendors in the past 3 years, and I think Mr. Bryan could attest to this, we're changing rapidly to want to do the right thing.
I just think it should be first come, first serve, if nothing else. If the person's not there, don't leave the chair. There are hundreds lined up every morning. A lot of them, unfortunately, go empty. And that's what irritates not only the resident, the local, the new local, or it's the tourist as well. They get frustrated. We also have a lot of aggressive beach vendors who are in your face, attacking, families because they set up 2 inches too close to them or in front of them, or heaven forbid that they've picked up the chair and umbrella and set their own stuff there.
Now, I've heard that a few times, and I believe they should go, without a doubt.
You have to figure out a
We
way.
don't stand for that, and the problem is, it's like anything else, just one or two bad people can give a bad name to an entire industry.
Absolutely.
In the military, we did have code reds. We had blanket parties. We took care of our own. So, not saying you need to do that, but the vendors need to come together and weed out the.
We formed an association. We tried to go through the county to say, hey, by forming this association, can we make it mandatory that in order to vend in Walton County, you have to be a part of this association? And the answer was no, you cannot do that. So we have a nice association, that we're trying to do the right thing. And if anything, it's mainly public awareness that we got to do better, guys. We got to do this. And there are people that don't want to be a part of it because they want to do their own thing and they don't need to be a part of it. It's just like corporate America. If you said in whatever industry you're in, hey, we need to do better, be in our industry, there's going to be several people that are, lack of better words, that just say, no, screw that, I'm going to do what I want to do. And unfortunately, that's the battle that I fight today. I try to do the right thing, and I consistently have people doing what is not right, and then I have to fight that fight for stuff that my company's not even doing. And it is my problem, so don't take that as deflection.
So
Brian, have we been weeding out any of these bad vendors? Have we?
I think the first thing we need to understand is that in this room, on social media, on any other type of public forum, there needs to be an understanding that there's two different types of beaches. There's vendors on private beaches and there's vendors on public beaches. And I understand that there is boorish behavior by vendors, but those typically are vendors that have been tasked with securing a public or private beach. And so it would be no different. So we got to solve the problem of who can use the beach and when they can use the beach before we start pinning this down on vendors. Okay, I'm not saying that some vendors have bad behavior.
Well, some of the private property owners, they just need to publicize what areas are for public and what areas are for the vendors, like in Topsail. They need to make their guests aware of that.
Well,
And that's, I mean,
well,
for
they-
private beaches,
Well,
that's
they
all
do,
there's.
they do.
Yeah.
There's signage on the beach now, if you go down the beach now, you see signage on the beach that says, this is a private beach. And so, but people are still accustomed to coming down, when I say accustomed, the 7-day visitor that's not staying in the Gulfront property, you know, in the previous years, they've come down to the public beach access and they filtered left and right and they didn't have any issues. Well, with the revision to the signage code, the preemption of customary use, and the main problem we have is congestion, is now they're being confronted on private property. And they don't like it, they don't accept it, they don't understand it. And so that's why I want to make the comment that we all need to understand that at this current time, there is a difference between private property vendors and public beach vendors. Because I'll venture a guess that, when I say I venture a guess, I do it by the understanding of the data we collect. We don't have too many of those kind of problems on public beach. The vendors that deliver their product to the public beach, they understand the vendor zone. They understand that the public has a right to all of the beach. There's not any we're not aware of much confrontation between vendors on public beach and the general public on public beach.
Since we've been regulating the vendors, have we identified any bad vendors? Have we precluded them from vending on the public beaches?
No, so the current code has some vague and ambiguous language in it that says that permits can be revoked, and it basically describes an administrative type hearing process. All right, it doesn't identify who gets to choose which vendors go through this administrative process. It doesn't identify who the administration is that makes a decision. It doesn't say any type of your revocation time. You know, when do you get an opportunity to get your license, your permit back, or anything? So last year they asked me to form a committee to establish this process, and I did. And it is now within that committee, and there's been no movement on it. I predict that it will be part of our code revision this year.
Okay, great.
But you know, as you go through that, there's a lot of questions that come up as to how that process works to be fair.
And also
Lisa,
to speak real quick on the public beaches, ever since I became involved and other vendors, that we essentially knew that we needed to clean up our industry. We formed an association that over the past 3 years, code enforcement violations by vendors on public beaches has drastically decreased every single year.
Yeah.
And it is my job to make sure we continue to do that because I want to be a good steward. But again, the issue comes down to we're just a byproduct of this tourism industry that's exploded. And now we have customary use that we had, and that's great, the world's good, everybody's happy, and now we don't, it's taken away, which raises the contentiousness and the anger, and it's, a lot of times, it gets put on a vendor, and I understand what the private beach is, what he's essentially replaced their logo on their shirt that says a vending company and put a security guard sticker.
Mm-hmm.
That's all they're hired to do, and we don't do any of that, because we just don't have contracts like that. But on the public beaches, we have a 50% zone of what we're allowed to set up on, which in a lot of places is not even enough space. And it is strictly a supply and demand issue of space. And we're doing the best we can with what we work with to supply the tourist that wants the needs.
So just,
Lisa?
I'm sorry. You said in the association, why not require every vendor to be part of the association, have a code of conduct, an ethics? I have several certifications I have to attest.
We have vendor rules. They have to register with the county.
No, but
So I mean,
But I'm
not
to your
just their
exact point,
association.
we tried to do that a year ago, and we met with the county attorney and said, one of the commissioners said, can you make it mandatory that they have these set of rules that we all have to abide by, but additionally, they have an association that has even higher rules and guidelines. Make them all be in it to vend in this county, and the answer from the county attorney is we can't do that.
Yeah,
So, I mean,
that's-
is that changed?
I don't take no the first time, so that makes no sense to me. I've had a lot of attorneys tell me I couldn't do something. I-
I'll certainly keep.
Yeah, I
I
don't
know we're
think
in a
we can
county
force
different,
people to be part of an association. That's, yeah.
The realtor.
Lisa, did you want to say something?
Yeah, a couple of questions. Do we require?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Do we require an authorization letter for private place vendors?
Yes.
So even if it's on private property, like, and I'm not talking about a resort property, but let's say that, I've heard, I don't know if this is true, but I've heard that there are some condo associations that are smaller, not seaside, or not things like Sandestin, or that there are actually individual private property homeowners who have hired vendors to set up all across their property to keep the public from sitting there.
Right.
Now, if that's true, are they required, if they're then acting like a single place vendor, are they not? If
Right,
they're
and
doing
so they're required to obtain a specific place permit.
And do they have to show you the letter from the owner?
Yes, ma'am, that's part of the
And do
application.
they have to post their permit as a specific place permit at the beach site where they set up?
No, ma'am.
Can we do that?
If you have a box, you do.
Requiring the number you do.
Pardon me?
It's required to have the permit number at every specific site.
And if you have a box, it has to be
Well-
posted
That's
on
permitted
the
for a
box.
site.
Okay, but
Right.
if I've got, let's use me, let's pretend I've hired, a vendor to set up chairs all across the front of my beach, okay? And somebody comes along and says, look what she's done, she's lined them up, we can't even walk by anymore, we, do something. Then shouldn't I have to have on those chairs that my vendor has set
Oh, yeah,
up?
yeah.
Shouldn't I have to have a permit number,
Well,
something posted
what
that
the code,
says?
yeah, what the
I
code
was-
requires is that you have the permit available for review by our officers, not necessarily the general public. Your equipment has to be clean, in good shape, and have the company's logo on it.
But
All
another
right.
thing is you
But-
can get
but-
up to a $500 fine for setting up on a piece of private property that you don't have a permit
Well,
to be
that's
at.
great, but what if what if the owner is absentee? They don't realize it's being done.
Okay.
Somebody will call on you.
All
Somebody
right,
will call.
so what you're referring to is a type of non-compliant behavior that does exist. But as Philip was alluding to right then, is it doesn't exist for very long because private property owners that do not want vendors are very quick to let us know, okay? And in the case of absentee owners, we do have some of this in some of these smaller townhome, what I call the 9-unit townhomes, mostly down on the east end of our beach, that vendors know that there's an absentee owner and that the property is not under a property management company, it's just a VRBO management company or Airbnb or whatever. And so they know that nobody will file a complaint. So we do have a few instances throughout the year of where a vendor will be vending on private property where there is not a specific place permit, and there's also has been no complaints by the property owner, okay? We do get a lot of complaints from vendors on vendors. They'll say they don't have a specific place permit.
Well, couldn't it help if it's required to be posted?
To post a permit?
If
This is a pretty rare, with what you're saying, I understand, is that what if we have the issue that someone is setting up all across a beach and they're really not allowed to? At the end of the day, that vendor is getting paid by the private property owner because the private property owner says, I really want you to do this. No vendor wants to set up and expend a bunch of labor every day to take up a bunch of room and get yelled at by somebody on the beach.
But
well, what about the ones though that are supposedly getting, the private property owner is getting a cut, whether that's condos or whatever? Is that, to me, that's operating a business.
So
right,
that
and
currently is
so
in the
as we
rules.
encounter
That's in the
those,
rules, yeah.
as we encounter
And
those,
that's the beginning of, early in the 90s, this is how vending began, was like at One Seagrove Place or Beachcrest or in front of Emerald Hill even, we had a vendor at one time. But that leads to a question that I have asked before. If you go to section E, number 4, if you are operating water-based activity operations, it says that, all vendors involving water sports and their designated employees shall be required to obtain a CPR certification for water safety.
Mhm.
Back then, even if you were at a private, place, like, say Emerald Hill or a private home who provided a vendor, if they had more than a certain number of setups, like say I just had a single family house and you were gonna put 2 setups out there for whoever what it was. But if you were a condo and you had more than 2 setups or 4 setups, I think it was, you had to have someone who sat there all day and they had to be CPR certified. Now, I understand that's a little bit hard now with the way the companies work. But a lot of these companies are actually vending paddle boards, kayaks from that site. But from the way I read this, the only water sports activity that requires the CPR certification is the ones who are doing things like up in Miramar with
Correct.
parasailing and that type
Jet
of
skis,
thing.
parasailing, and stuff like that.
So if you're in front of Beechcrest or One Seagull Place and you're out there renting paddle boards and things, that's still water-based activity, and they're not required, is that correct?
That's correct. Well, you have it because you have a place down in Miramar, but,
But the way the ordinance and the way I apply every year,
mhm,
every last one of the water sport-based activities, which is paddleboard and kayaks,
mhm.
I have certified CPR first aid attendant with the documentation showing that they're that.
And they stay there all day, right?
Yes,
Mhm.
so
Right.
someone's only doing that generally when they know they have the ability to sell that product because they have a person there selling it. And therefore you have the CPR person. And you have to pay an additional $500 to get that.
Mhm.
So if I have a small condo contract that I rent a couple sets to, and we don't have someone sit there, we don't pay that additional funds because it doesn't make sense for us because we're not gonna be able to have a guy sit down there and rent it out. And then the alternative is you can go under your delivery permit, or someone in that condo wanted a paddleboard for the day, someone delivers it to their door and they go do whatever they do.
That's different,
It's
yeah.
different.
Right.
But, and I had brought this up to you quite a while ago, because I know that, and I'm not gonna call out any specific vendors, so I won't say where, but I know the person that sat there all day, and I know what they were renting, and I know that person that wasn't CPR certified, and it's a large company. So, and this is several places. So that was why I'm bringing up the question, how are we verifying that these people that are down there are CPR certified?
They have to s-
Is code asking when they come up
They-
to,
They have to submit a certificate with their application.
but is it being followed up on as they're going through their daily activities by code enforcement? Are they being checked?
Are we checking to make sure that the attendance on duty is the person that has the submitted certificate? No, ma'am, I can't say we're doing that on a daily basis. If it comes to our attention, we would check it, but once again, we don't have very many places that have the water sports activities, except down at Miramar Beach. We do have a few at some of these places down here that are renting some paddle boards and kayaks. And like I say, there's somewhat of a loophole for delivery vendors.
Well, I was a
But-
delivery vendor, but I delivered to their door and they signed a disclaimer, this was their responsibility.
Right,
You know, they had to carry it down to the beach, we didn't, but.
right.
But when you've got somebody sitting there actually
Mhm.
vending, this was always a requirement, but you're saying it still is, but we're just not verifying it on
Mhm.
just regular checks. It's not
Right.
something one of our officers would go up and ask.
Right.
Are you looking for us to make motions and vote on some things?
I think we'll go, kind of making a list of different items now, and then we can turn back around and vote on them, or like I say, if y'all would feel compelled that we need to wait till next time, it'll push the whole thing back, but, it's not uncommon for us to not make decisions until January, so.
It's just a clerical note on what we were just talking about. That number 4, it says all vendors involving water sports. Water sports isn't defined. Water-based activities is defined in the definitions. So maybe we ought to just change that to water-based activities.
And that's why I say, before I
Clerical.
misspoke, I wanted to read back through the code to make sure that I was speaking correctly. And so it's been, SOP or common knowledge that those activities that had people parasailing, jet skiing, or renting a sailboat or something like that were the ones, in other words, where you would be, I know that you're on a paddleboard or you're on a kayak. that you're-
Water-based activities defines all that.
Right.
I mean, it specifically says kayaks.
But water sports is
rental.
what 4 says, not.
Yeah,
water-based
yeah,
activities,
exactly.
right.
It should just be
Right.
changed to water-based activities instead
Yeah.
of water sports, since it's defined.
And
under-
truthfully, because you have, I think they're required to have a boat and all of that out there.
Mm-hmm.
The people that are vending the paddle boards and such are not required to have all that. And then South Walton Fire, those are places they're harder for them to get to. We do have a lifeguard, say, in Seagrove at the regional access, but then they've got to get there, you know, and there should be someone there. And I just think we need to be verifying
Yeah.
that is happening, because I know for a fact it's not happening in some places. But, I mean,
So the CPR or chase boats, or do you think all?
CPR, at least
Mhm.
CPR
Okay.
certified, it is what I have always believed was the case, as long as I've been here over 20 years. So I do agree that needs to be changed though in 4, so that it covers all, because that's why to me, it seemed like you didn't have to have it unless you were doing these other activities, not just the paddle boards
Mhm.
and the kayaks, because it does appear that way because of the verbiage.
I've got a couple more. This is.
I'm sorry, I
new.
interrupted
Oh,
you,
no,
but I
no,
was
don't
along the
apologize.
vein
That's
of
Yeah.
what you were doing.
On page 4 of 32, where it talks about solicitor canvas, I'm unclear whether this includes, if somebody is not actually charging, I brought this up before last year, if somebody's not charging, but they put vendor chairs with their logos and all that stuff on them on a beach, should that not still be included as soliciting or canvassing? If
If they did
it's
what
an
now?
area, pardon?
If they did what now?
I'm
If they did what?
Okay, if somebody is on a private beach or private beach areas but they're not charging, or a
They're charging-
non-vendor
They're
area.
charging somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've been told that some vendors are using them for friends and family, and they say they're not charging. But they're putting logoed, from time to time, this is not a constant, but from time to time, they put logoed merchandise on the area that they have not been approved for vending. And I just think if we, if
Like a private piece of property or a public beach?
private beaches.
So even if you do something at no charge, but it's commercial activity, like me saying, I can't, even if I give it to my buddy, I can't go set up on some private house that I don't even have permission to set up on.
The soliciting or canvassing is usually considered to be on public property.
Well, I knew, and you and I have talked about the specific situation, which, by the way, if you had a conversation, seems to, at least for the time being, subsided. But it's something that seems like it could be in the rules in a way that's identified, that you just don't put logoed property if you're not advertising, basically.
So I have a question about that. So I own a property, a condo in Gulf Place. Sunrise Coffee sells chairs with their logo on it. I'm going to purchase chairs, and I own my own concierge company. I don't do chair vending. I take care of VRBO type properties and put my logo on the chair in my privately owned condo or condos that I may provide services to, and it's just there.
Do you put your phone number, or does Sunrise Coffee put their phone number on it?
I can see the logo in my head, but I don't
No,
remember
they're
if I
not.
see a phone
No.
number. I think it's just Sunrise.
And they're
Coffee.
not a vendor, but.
But yeah, so that's why I didn't
Yeah.
know if that's what we're.
No, I was more geared toward, if you're putting one that's identified as a beach vendor and it's
Oh,
got the phone
So if
number,
it's a
contact
private
information.
residence or
Yeah.
some other type of company that's just putting a logo on there for
Yeah,
mainly,
Yeah.
so it doesn't disappear.
I don't know.
Right.
think we're
Do
getting-
the
That
chairs
could
have
be-
your phone number on them? 'Cause
I think we're getting
the
bogged down.
ones,
I
Some
think we're
do.
getting,
well, that could be, some don't. Okay, well, that's not a huge one, I just
Okay.
wanted to ask about it. And then, are we still anti-doing just one set time for the dogs, people?
Oh,
Are
don't
we-
get John going on the.
I
dogs.
know, John, but I think it's confusing to people that it changes with daylight savings
I
time.
agree.
And I think if we could make it something consistent and it's year-round, it just solves some confusion that is unnecessary.
I agree totally.
Florida's trying to go with one-time zone anyway.
Did they actually do that?
One time, no,
No,
the federal
that's not-
government won't allow it.
No, that's not gonna happen.
Okay.
It's happened before.
That's what I thought.
A couple states have it.
Well,
But
they've used the time
that's a
zone
little-
before in the state.
Yeah.
That's a little simple one if, you know, if people, are if there's a will to just make it defined as this hour, you know, between,
It's very confusing.
4
For-
p.m.
Even for the people
and
who have the permits, it is very
8 a.m.
confusing about, oh my gosh, what time is it? Oh, is it daylight or not? And what am I doing? And am I an hour early, an hour
Yeah.
late?
I've had a dog for years.
I have too, and,
I mean, I don't think it's confusing. I think the issue's not really, well, I guess it is.
well, there's
some
two
of the-
issues.
some
There's
of
the
the
people that
owners.
don't have a permit, and then there's
Yeah.
the people that need to keep up with what time they can go and can't go, and,
yeah.
you know.
Any recommendation on what that time frame would be?
It seems to me like 4 p.m. to, you know, 9 a.m. or something like that, because very rarely do I see a whole lot of people on the beach before 9. And
Oh, yeah, I do.
you do?
Oh, yeah.
Well, then 8. What do you think, Debbie?
Well,
What hours would you, because I readily admit the area of beach that I mostly see is the Dune Allen area, you know, from 393 to Topsail. And I'm not saying nobody's on the beach at 9 o'clock, because there are some, or 8:30, you know, 8:30 to 3:30 or something like that. But I wish we didn't see anything on the beach before 8 o'clock. Really?
Fishermen.
Huh? Except fishermen, they don't bother me.
well,
Whatever.
there's some of the ones that take their dogs, but,
Oh, really? No,
that's who
I've
I
never
see
seen
with
a
them. That's who
fisherman
I
with
see
a
with
dog.
them
That's,
at a lot of the outfalls is
Huh?
out there with their
That'd be me.
dogs, and,
that's you, huh?
yeah, you take your dog, right?
But okay, so what time, I mean, obviously, if the vendors are putting things out at 7:30 in the morning, then there's stuff out on the beach at that point, but I just like to see it. I'm not real picky. I never take my dog on the beach, because I don't care if I pottied him before we go to the beach. He's gonna wanna go everywhere he smells another dog. And so I don't take him to the beach. It's not worth it to me. But
I don't think the times are a problem, it's just the daylight and not daylight savings time is
So-
the issue. So I don't have a problem with the times as they currently are.
well, which one? Because right now,
Well-
they're two different times. That's my point, is could we get to one?
Yeah. The turtle people, I think, would be.
What do you
able-
think, Matt?
What do you think?
The reason for the time change is because, you know, in the winter, spring months, the days are shorter,
Yeah,
gets darker earlier, and doesn't get light as quicker. And so then when you have, so in other words, if you kept it at, you know, 8 or 4 p.m. to 8 a.m., in the winter months, people wouldn't have much time in the afternoon to walk their dog,
yeah.
nor would they have much time in the morning, because it doesn't get light as quick.
What if we compromised and did between 3:30 p.m. and 8:30 a.m.? Then it's right in the middle of the two different times.
Mm-hmm.
And it just means that during the winter, let's call
Mhm.
it the shortest time, yeah, you're right, they'd have an hour,
Yeah.
maybe, to walk the beach. But a lot of people, you know, if they're working, they can't even get to the beach till 5 o'clock anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, or later, but,
That's the people that are going out really early.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I think that, you know, I have written down, you know, dog.
but it's just
one time
something
frame,
I've
and then-
noticed, and
Is
even,
that something we wanna vote on, or?
well,
Like I say, we'll go back down through this real quick when we get done, and let's have a discussion right now, that way we won't have to have much discussion as we go down through them.
okay,
Okay.
and then.
Are you
Anything
done?
else, Lisa?
Yes, I've got one more, and I sent, well, actually, we did the first come, first serve thing, and, okay, there's two more. Toe of the dune storage, if I understand correctly, any boxes that are on the beach right now, at specific place or wherever, they are 90 degrees, they're perpendicular to the dune line, right?
Correct.
Okay, and I would suggest, and Matt, this is your area, I think 10 feet between boxes, if there's multiple ones,
There's
is,
already a rule.
is too few. I think
Okay.
that's too few feet, 10 feet apart. You know, I know that sand fencing's allowed to be 7 feet. I think that's too little. My personal practice is 15 feet between them, but, you know, I realize Fish and Wildlife or whoever makes those rules says 7. But I think boxes, given that they can be 4 feet by 8 feet with a footprint, it seems to me like, you know, turtles running into an 8-foot wall, that it'd be nice if they had a little more room than just 10 feet to maneuver around.
Okay, so what would you suggest?
Go ahead, man.
I was gonna first add to that, because that's something I wanted to bring up. 10 feet, not enough. I don't even think a lot of, some places are, but I was gonna bring up to you, there's, quite a few spots that I've been seeing that definitely aren't 10 feet. There's a few spots that I've documented that if a box can only be 4 by 8, I got pictures of boxes that are stacked together 3 in a row, which then makes the box 12 by 8. I mean, they're touching, so there's no way that, I mean, there's no gap. I'm not sure why that's getting approved if they have a special permit to do that. So you're asking for more than 10 feet. I'm seeing where they're not even enforcing 10 feet.
Right, I think it should be.
And then my other issue was I have a lot of documentation of the 10-foot gap is to allow access for the sea turtles to get to the toe of the dune. Well, then that 10-foot gap now is being filled with kayaks and paddle boards and all kind of stuff. So there really, I mean, and I have tons of pictures, so there is no, the gap's maybe not being used for storage when the gap is supposed to be there to access to the toe
And
of
I
the
think
dune.
the language is in here that they're
Well, no,
not
it is,
supposed
but I'm
to put
saying it's
anything
not
in between
getting
there, right?
enforced properly, and, there's some spots that I've seen it for multiple years, and I've maybe turned it in, but, I don't know what we're gonna do about it. It's obviously a rule, so I think we just need to enforce it, but, and I'm seeing
Well,
it.
let's
all
just
over.
identify the
The
areas,
violation-
the violators.
I mean, some of them I have turned in, and so some of them have been identified, and they're still there. Some are in the big resort areas, so I don't know if that has something to do with it.
I mean, a
But-
complaint should fix.
Yeah, I'm just stating what I've seen, what I've done. So beyond that, I don't know. But, so, I mean, I guess when we do more feet, which I have no problem with, then the vendors already run the problem. They're telling me they don't have enough storage as is for the gear they need. So once we spread that out, it takes boxes off their beach, which I'm fine with, but I know they're gonna fight back against that because they're gonna, you know, I need more boxes than I have now. The space might be more, I'm gonna lose another box or two. So I'm just talking out loud, but these are things I'm hearing back and forth, but what I brought up is definitely happening, and I'd like to see that.
So what you're talking about is an enforcement issue, and I'll address that
Okay,
internally.
okay.
Like I say, I understand that there are some instances that may be occurring, and I feel comfortable that our guys are addressing it, but I'll make sure they are.
These boxes have to be, like, when they turn their permit, it's on their map, right? That, here's my boxes.
Right.
So either A, they're not putting them on their map, and they're just doing it otherwise, or
Right.
B, they are, and it's just not being, taken care of, so.
Right, like I say, it's
Are
an
these in-
enforcement issue, it's not a code issue.
Yeah,
Are these in the big resort areas or
for the
smaller
most
areas?
part, yeah.
Well, in the bigger areas, I mean, they could put some storage at the top of the dune. If they, you know, if they have to space them out and they don't have enough storage, put one at the top of the dune for them.
Well,
I
they
know it's
certainly
more
do.
work and stuff, but the big resorts,
But we're still having a big issue too, with just, the gaps are being filled now by just random
Yeah.
crap.
you know.
Like I say, what Matt is explaining is an enforcement issue of an existing code, and I'll address that.
And my
But if
last
you're
thing-
interested in changing the code as to what the code should read, you know, then
Yeah.
what Lisa's talking about is we increase that distance that's allowable.
I would hope that anybody that has so many chairs that they need more boxes has enough room to distribute them 20 feet instead of 10. But, I mean, if you're talking about Seaside, Watercolor, Alice Beach, things like that, they have they have
Mhm.
very large beaches, so they,
Yeah.
as a matter of fact, you'd almost think in some ways they'd like having them distributed so that
They don't have to carry him so
yeah,
far.
they don't have to go so far to service the people. But anyway, it's a thought. And last.
So what would be the distance you would recommend?
Pardon me?
What would be the distance you would recommend?
Well, my thought was 20 feet, but every bit helps. 15 feet is,
Propose your 20 feet if you're comfortable.
I
with
like
that.
20, personally, I think 20 feet's reasonable. And it gives the turtle plenty of maneuvering room.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
I've seen a lot of where they turn around, where the turtles turn around, where they take up a pretty good radius to turn. So I just like to protect that for them.
Okay.
Then the other thing that has gotten put by the wayside, but, we've had tent issues for years now, where we've, gone from 10-foot tents to 6-foot tents to back to 10-foot tents and put them on the back third. I personally think that with the continued marketing to this area, I know the customary use thing right now is an issue, I get it, but, part of why the whole customary use thing is an issue is we just aren't controlling things well enough. And tents and canopies are something we do not have to have. People can use umbrellas, they can use vendor umbrellas, they can use personal umbrellas. I would love to see this county bite the bullet, stop the beach spread the best they can, and one of those ways is to just say, we're not gonna have tents and canopies. We're not gonna have sun shelters on the beach of any description except for umbrellas up to this size, unless you have a special permit for some reason or another. So that's my recommendation, and
I'd like to say something about that. I
Yeah.
volunteered for the kids' fishing tournament.
Mhm.
And I mean, Grayton Beach State Park had a tent out there. We had a tent out there. We were cooking hamburgers for the kids on the beach, preparing food, which we're not supposed to do.
that's a
And there was a
special
tent
permit.
for that and stuff.
Yeah, but she said she had an exception for
Yeah, I would
special event
have an
permit.
exception that you have, and I'm not even saying you have to have a paid permit, I'm just saying that you have to let the county know, look, we're gonna have this Boy Scout thing, or whatever it is, and we'd like to have
So that would just be
four
a
or five
special event
tents.
permit, and we
Well,
include the,
that, it's already in
Correct.
the code.
Yeah.
If you need a larger tent or for a special event, that there's a process for that. So you're just asking that the tents, there be no tents at all. And I will say that if that's the case, I'm not sure what they approve for special, but we need to be sure that disabled persons who need a larger area than an umbrella, be included in that special permit.
That, and
Okay.
I certainly
So
wouldn't
did
have an
it-
issue with that at all.
Right. So Lisa, would this be on public and private beach, universal, or?
Personally, and as you know, I am a beachfront owner, so I think that if a beachfront owner wants a tent, that they should have a permit, just like they have a bonfire permit. I have talked to a lot of owners about that very issue, and I have yet to find anybody that has stomped up and down and said, it's my property, I'll do what I want to with it. I'm not saying they don't exist, but
As this reads, the homeowner has to have one permit to be able to burn bonfires. Do they have to apply for that yearly, or how does that
Yes.
work?
So if you're a
That's
Gulfront
yearly?
property owner, you can apply and receive,
So
apply
they
for and
can-
receive an annual permit, and
So
that
they can do the
permit,
same thing for a tent.
yes.
On state lands, we don't limit what tent they can put up,
right. and-
except for it can't be closed in like a camping tent.
Yeah.
That's our real rule on
And that's the only rule you all have, I would do differently,
it. Well, it's a rule.
because I like
across
your rules
the-
otherwise.
Yeah, the state.
come on, Dave.
Yeah.
But-
Hey, good morning, Dave Meadows. Tents. Okay, so when the county tried to ban tents last time, the big social cry was, it's the vendor's fault, the vendor did it. So I want you guys to know, the moment that you do ban tents, your umbrella population for the vendors is going to increase. So you might be creating, adding to the problem that you already exist. I love it. I have condos that don't allow tents at all, and our business is great. Because everybody comes down, rents an umbrella, because they don't want to go to Walmart and they don't want to buy the flimsy one. So just be careful what you start throwing around up here,
I want
because
first come, first served too.
but there's still going to be more vendors putting out more umbrellas because they can't have a tent.
Right,
So,
right,
and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
but I do think coupled with first come, first served, I don't think just tents are gonna solve things. I think presets on the beach are a problem. I don't care who does them, they're a problem. The beach isn't for reserving You know, it's for using, and if people aren't even there, they just don't need to have all this stuff set up that keeps other people that are there
I
from
agree,
being
that's a
able to use
problem.
it.
I mean, people reserve chairs and don't even use them.
Why are you looking like that, David?
Yeah, let me, just give me my view. I'm sorry.
You had a look on your face like you had something you thought different.
No.
No? Okay.
My viewpoint on this, okay, so this is my 30th year putting out chairs and umbrellas in Walton County. Over that period of time, it is so rare that it is, you know, the customer coming down. Well, I'll take that back. In the past 10 years, since online, social media, every avenue that they can to book it online, to buy it, to reserve it, so forth, way ahead of time. So, example, one of our condos down the way, every Sunday morning is the day that starts. Saturday is turnover day, so there's hardly any umbrellas on the beach. But Sunday morning, 99% of my entire front row is already booked, done. So we go out Sunday morning, we set them all up, and we open up from 9 to 5. They all are down there on the beach between 8 and 9, sitting in their chairs and ready to go. Majority of all the pictures that everybody posts on social media are at 6:30 in the morning when the vendor is setting up, saying, oh my God, they're go sets. But they never come back and post the pictures at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock that's packed and filled with the people that are the public that rent the chairs and umbrellas. So a lot of this stuff is just driving me crazy.
You have to agree that by the middle of the week or toward the end of the week, and they're going shopping and stuff, and a lot of times
Those
they
numbers
don't
have
come down
changed.
and use their
Those
chairs.
numbers have changed
But- but-
I
drastically.
see a lot of them.
But-
baby.
Well, just
They have
just
paid
for an
for it.
example,
Let me interject.
it has
agree,
changed.
but
They have to set them up, yeah.
regardless, they're sitting on the beach. empty.
But once
Right.
again, I'm
Right.
talking about a private property, okay?
Yeah,
A
private.
private property is a private property.
Alright.
That association sets their rules for their guests that check in and stay on their property. So they tell them, you can't have your personal set here, you can do this, you can't do that, and so forth. It's not the vendor setting all those rules. Yeah, there's negotiation in a contract and everything else that takes place, but almost every property makes money off the vendor. Private property. The only one that's not making any money off the vendor is the public, is Walton County Public Beaches. They just make it on a permit, a delivery fee, and that's it. And until the day that the county adopts a bidding process and hires one vendor, two vendors, how many vendors you want on there, but control it. And have a vendor on the beach to regulate the chairs and umbrellas, set them up first come, first serve, that's fine.
Yeah, I think.
But
you
have them on there for safety, for communication, for everything else. How many pictures have gone around this past month or 2 months on all the umbrellas flying down the beach? Flying down through Grayton, through all the places that are public that you cannot have an attendant on there to regulate, to watch, to do anything.
That goes back to my question about the manned,
The demand is there, it's just
no,
nonstop.
the manned chairs.
Oh, yes,
The
ma'am.
manned chairs, because one of those videos of the umbrellas flying at the outfall at Eastern Lake, I mean, that was from my house, which is hundreds of yards, okay, and I could video those flying through the air. That storm had been predicted. There is no reason for that vendor to have had those umbrellas out there and open. They should have been picked up. And the truth is, they weren't even on land they're supposed to be vending on. So that, in that particular video, there are a lot of other videos that, you know, you don't know the situation.
But also don't forget that the county allows a vendor, a beach vendor, to apply for a permit. It's their second job, third job, whatever the case may be. So they get up early in the morning, drop off the sets that they've been rented, and then they go to their other jobs and they don't come back until dark 30. And then they pick them up. So there's nobody there
Or
to
they
regulate or take care of their stuff at all throughout the course of the day. And for our company being as large as we are, when we're running down the beach, puffing and closing every single umbrella, I close every single other vendor's umbrella along my stretch. Yep. It's a safety thing, and for those that care about the business, that have been doing it for 30 years, we do our best to protect the county, protect our customer, because we want our customer to keep coming back, because it is a business. All right.
Yeah, I think you had a good point there. You can't put the private land in with the, you know, behind private businesses with the county property.
Well,
Right.
isn't the biggest
Right.
problem
You
with
can't,
the
you're not gonna be
public?
able to put them all under the same umbrella.
Yeah, and then when you do, you just create the confusion that we experienced last year when we did try to get rid of the tents and code enforcement was going out there and it created mass confusions because my guys working on the beach out there were to become the arbiters and we had to become experts on the nuances of the property lines that nobody really knew about and it was chaos.
Yeah,
It was chaos. Everyone was confused and angry. And to Dave's point, it's
so did tents get rid of that or not?
no,
I mean,
people
no
were
tents
defiant
held.
anyways. I mean, and then
Yeah.
if I understood, the code enforcement would come out and they spent, because it was in the process of enforcing it but not hard enforcing it, even if a hard enforcement was to take place, it was still a notice to correct, giving them a chance to do it. And for John Q. Public, who comes down here from BFE, comes down, pops his tent, Jeff McVeigh comes out and yells at him, tells him he can't do it. Guy gets defiant,
We get
says
better.
basically, F you, what are you going to do about it? Jeff can't do anything about it because he's got to give the notice to correct. So it's literally an unenforceable
Yeah,
thing.
you wanna
You mean
keep
to
it
do
as
no
simple.
tents is
Yes.
unenforceable?
Pretty much. In effect, you can make all the rules you want about it, but when it came down, when push came to shove and it was actually put into practice and we were trying to enforce the no tent, no canopy thing on the public beaches, because Ed Walline, perfect example. You've got Ed Walline, then you've got the Gulf Place, and you got all those condos. You got your vendor zones, which is its own layer of confusion. Then you've got the no canopies rule, and then you've got code enforcement coming in, telling people, okay, that's private property over here. This is public property. On this public property, you can't have these canopy tents. Well, they can have theirs. Well, that's private property. These people are going, what? Well, I don't understand any of this. And then Jeff says, okay, well, here is the rule. You can't have this tent here. And by the way, it needs to be behind these chairs, and you've got a notice to correct, and I'll be back. I'll see you later. And by the time he comes back, the guy either is defiant, they don't care, or they leave it, or the windstorm comes through and it gets tossed down the beach.
Mhm.
Dave or my guys are out there chasing all these things down. It really was just a complex problem with no simple solution. Everyone wants to create. I understand we're doing the code revisions and stuff, but when you have the difference between, we can make all the public beach rules
and
we want.
enforcement.
Yeah, even if we had the perfect set of public beach enforcement rules, the fact that we can't do it countywide on the private property pretty much renders those moot. And then moreover, you have the problems with the code enforcement officers who are bound by Florida statute that they have to do, they can't just go out there and grab someone's stuff, crunch it up, put it in the back of their truck and say, there, I fixed that problem and here's your ticket.
I understand all that, David, but otherwise what we're saying is let's just all throw up our hands and
No.
say, well, do what you want, folks, because we can't enforce the rules. And I don't believe that.
No, I don't think that's what he's saying. I think he's trying to describe a scenario that we have to keep it within what we can actually manage and maybe not take huge steps, but let's look at how we can simplify it. And some of the things you guys have talked about, I think, take care of that. The setup vending, where they have to set up on the public beaches, that's a doable thing. Probably not that and you'll see a change, at the beginning, and it takes time to get through. And you gotta run it through a year or two for it to actually, anything change. Where on the private beaches, you're gonna have, look at, well, they can do their setups like they've been doing. That works for them. That's what the resorts are set up for. When you go to a resort, people that go to those and spend that kind of money, that's their expectation.
Sure.
It's like I always say, my mission is different than the county's mission and different than the mission of the resorts. But we all do what we do the best we can. And we have to look at the big picture throughout the county. And how does this work for each section of beach? And some things we might can adapt for total sections of beach, but there will be time, like say, I would love to see the garbage cans off the beach and make it all carry on, carry off. But that's not something we can do overnight. It's gonna be a process that has to happen.
Sure.
And we'd have to look at sections of beach and where will it work first? And let's move to those. Maybe the areas that are more natural, let's work at those areas first. And then spread it out. That eliminates unnecessary driving on the beach,
How much
minimizing the
trash
amount
do
of
we
drivers.
collect every year? We got
Over
any-
77,000 bags last year.
How many?
Over 77,000 bags, and we're looking to surpass that this year.
If we could drive across the beach.
No, even with our limited, garbage collection after July 1st, we're still looking at surpassing that.
So if we can't drive across the beach, is carry off gonna be our next move? I mean, how far is it? There's so many sections along the beach that we can't drive now.
Well, actually, there's one major section we can't drive. We actually were able to get about a little over 50% of the beach open back up. So we can't
Okay.
drive between Western Lake and just east of Alice Beach right now. There's a small section in Miramar we can't get to, but it's from Norwood to Sand Trap. It's, and it's all single-family dwellings right there, so it's not much.
You think it's feasible to collect 77,000 bags from the street?
It's not feasible. I mean, we're already doing that on our, so when I say we're not collecting between Eastern and Western Lake, we're not collecting off private property. We're still collecting our garbage from our neighborhood beach accesses and our regional beach access that's in that area, and we're doing it from the top side. It's not efficient. It's creates some of the same problems that were talked about by the vendors not having to remove their product every day, is that we're interacting with people on the boardwalk with, wet garbage. Some of our boardwalks have, 3 flights of stairs that are, 14 to 18 steps each. Some of them have switchbacks. Our switchback at Santa Clara is, I want to say it's 360 feet of switchbacks. And so it's not efficient, but we're making it happen on those. But to do that on private property has other problems. So a lot of those are in gated communities. They have gates at the road. They also have gates at the walkovers. So we have to have access into there. We have to have parking areas. That's one problem we are experiencing with our neighborhood beach accesses, is where we park our truck while we're servicing this neighborhood beach access.
Some of them block 30A. You have to
Yeah,
block
I mean,
30A. It's
invariably,
not a
I mean,
pull-off.
How late in
Yeah.
the day does the trash collection extend? I mean,
Well,
it's usually in the morning mostly, but.
Right, so, in the period of time from January to 1st of March, we're usually off the beach by 10:30 or 11. Okay, during spring break, we're out there till about 1, maybe 2. During the height of the summer, we're out there all day long.
See, to have these trucks running up and down 30A all day long with the traffic situation, that's not feasible.
No, but that was why I was decided to not pick up garbage on private beach. Like I say, it's hard enough getting it off our public beach accesses from the top to think we can do it. So is that a solution? Okay, it is a solution, but we gotta come up with other, components of that. And that would be, for public beach accesses, adequate service area parking at the road, okay? More than likely, on some of the accesses would be some sort of lift system to get garbage from beach level to top of dune level. Once again, at Santa Clara, it's about a 20-foot change in elevation. The other thing is on private beaches is the access problem I talked about, service parking area inside their communities. Do they want our trucks with garbage traversing their, inland portions of their communities all during the day? We would also have to have more frequent, what I call drop-off areas or weigh stations for our garbage. Right now, we have compactors at Blue Mountain. We have open top at the fire station in Inlet Beach, and we have a couple of open tops at Topsail, which are more than likely going away, and we have an open top down in Miramar. We would need more of those areas, because one of our biggest problems right now is that limited access to the beach and how much time we spend going back down the beach and then back on the road to carry garbage to Blue Mountain Beach. That's where we carry most of our garbage. And so what I'd like to see is more frequent weigh stations and more frequent areas, if I was gonna get back on the beach, to get onto the beach. Different problem there, but, so.
If we eliminate the beach collection, all those trucks are gonna be up and down 30A, back to the transfer station, back down 30A.
Right,
back
they're
to the
already
transfer
on
They're
station.
already up and down.
Well, they're up and down the beach, and then on 30A back to the
Yeah.
transfer
But like I
station and
say, the
stuff.
biggest
But
problem-
yeah, there's gonna be a lot more traffic on 30A if we
So you're
eliminate
doubling the
beach
30A
pickup.
traffic, then having to stop and do the collection from the top side at 30A. So you're not
And
only,
blocking
you're not only
traffic on
doubling,
neighborhood
you're
access.
more than
And
doubling.
the other problem is patterning the people to carry the garbage off the beach. And so,
That's right.
well, while a lot of people will do that, it's been successful in limited areas. You
Yeah,
know,
I think the people that go to the state parks are a little different than some of the people that go to the public beach access. I've ran into people on the beach that litter and they think they're entitled to litter, that somebody else should
They
clean
pay
up
their
after
money
them
and-
because they're paying a lot of money to stay here.
Well, I'll
And
address-
vendors
be
are
argued.
paid to do that.
It
yeah.
could
I
be
wouldn't
argued.
mind addressing that.
Yeah.
When I, 20 after Opal is when we took the garbage cans off the beach at St. Andrews State Park. Prior to that, I used to pick the garbage up on the beach as they do now. And there was always litter on the beach everywhere. As we moved the garbage cans, first move was to move them to the bottom of the boardwalks and get the people just used to taking the garbage there. And yes, we had a year or so that we had to carry, walk down the boardwalks, which at St. Andrews, some of those boardwalks are long, and tote that garbage all the way down the boardwalks. Our next move was to move them up to the tops of the boardwalks. At Grayton Beach, you'll notice that they're not down at the bottom of the boardwalk, they're up at the parking lot. And we have a little place like he discussed, you'd have to eventually, and that's why I was saying it's a process. It's not something that you can just, we're gonna do this overnight. And you'd have to look at each area because you have to change it. You have a little pull place where the guy that comes in, he pulls in there, he parks, he's off the road, he picks up the garbage, and our parking lot's full, as y'all well know, during the summer. It's packed, people are loading and unloading, but we can get in there and unload the garbage and maneuver out of there, get the garbage to a dumpster nearby, and we're good until the garbage collection comes around and takes the dumpsters out of there.
So you're
And it would-
saying that since you moved it up, you have less litter on the beach?
Way less litter on the beach, because what you did is you set a mindset that this is not where trash belongs. So people carry the garbage closer to where the trash belongs.
The whole
It's all
concept
so light.
blows my mind. People come here for our pristine beaches and then they want to trash them. Yeah, I don't understand that anyway.
Well,
but-
when you put, to me, psychologically, you put the garbage on the beach, that's where people expect to leave the garbage. They don't, that's where we leave the garbage. When you go out and you do go up to any national park and walk into the trails, there's not gonna be garbage along those trails. You'll hike for days. You gotta carry your garbage out with you.
I think we have the whole issue with the garbage collection too, like we were just talking. Collecting it from topside versus collecting it from the beach
It's a
side.
big process, and it's gonna take years,
You want-
especially on the whole county.
Yeah.
You're not gonna do it
Before they
overnight.
started trash collection, 20 years ago? Is that about right? Trash cans at every single boardwalk, every beach that we did, and there was one condo with 6 boardwalks and 6 trash cans at the top of the beach, of the walkovers. And it was a job of the beach attendant then to empty those all the time, pick everything off the beach. Once the county started picking up trash, year after year after year after year, people got really complacent. Oh, convenience, awesome.
Yeah.
Toss it in there and go. Throw my tent over here. Guess what? I come down the next day, it's gone. Somebody magically picked it up. So everybody has gotten used to our pampering of all of our tourists. It's a great business. I love it. I would hate to have to pick up the trash, but right now we do at several locations. We have to because the private property has been affected by the trash collection. So it's either the maintenance from the HOA that comes down and picks up the trash, or it's our beach attendants picking up trash and removing the cans on a daily basis. So that's just the one point on there, but if trash stopped at every single private property location, it would take some time, but eventually it'll go back to those days to where people are responsible for picking up their trash. Because the first week that they stopped, we walked the line on every last one of our 80 umbrellas out there and let everybody know, please bring a trash bag with you tomorrow. Because
And you can't do it during the
you won't be
season.
able to put it in a can. What? What do you mean? I have to take my trash. Yes, ma'am, we do. Unfortunately, until all this gets resolved, all of our guests are responsible for removing their trash.
And if you
Simple
do
as
it
that.
off-season, then it's kind of a break in the time to
Absolutely.
change. And you make those changes during the off-season so that the new season, when it kicks in, people are kind of get used to doing it, and that's,
Well, it's a lot of education.
it is.
And the one thing that, just, drives me crazy and my hair keeps turning gray and I get angry all the time is the out of control beach vendors. And you know, it's like a blanket statement that just covers all of us, and that's not the case. I mean, education is a big role for the beach vendor because most of us sit there and tell all of our guests these things. Most of us put signs on the beach say, if you dig a hole, please bury it. You know, we constantly are communicating something that benefits the county. I say that in the larger companies and maybe some of the smaller ones, but there are several bad apples in this bunch that don't tell them a single thing. One thing about the public knowing the confusion when you come down to a public access, and said I posted this picture, and it is a map that TDC and code enforcement provide to every single vendor. And that map is the aerial map of a property outlined in red, and then vendor zones all mapped out on there also. I know it changes based on the language in the ordinance that allows an upland property owner to dictate what happens on a public beach, which I disagree with. I think it's the public beach, and the public should be able to, the county should decide on if there's going to be a vendor zone there or not. But if those maps would stay more permanent, those maps can be posted down on every single access for people to see. Matter of fact, we're going to change all of our signage in accordance to the sizes and colors, but we are going to provide a map on all of our signs down on the beach showing exactly what's what, where the private property line is, and so forth, until that all gets resolved. One more thing.
And again, to piggyback off of Dave, when we talk about vendors and bad apples and things like that, what has made so many people mad, and Debbie was discussing and other people, is people are grouping in vendors as bad people because of the contracts that are the security guard types, which in all honesty have nothing to do with a beach vendor per se. And I wish that we could do something on it, but at the end of the day, customary use does not exist. There are private property rights. I have no dog in that fight. I don't own Gulffront property. We don't do contracts with that nature. But the thing is, they have the right to do that. There's no rules we can make, no rules Brian can make, no rules Mr. J can make to do anything to change that.
That's right.
And it is what it is, but the thing, and I'm going to be the last person to go get on Facebook and get destroyed by all these people. I removed myself from those groups, I swear, because I couldn't sleep at night. Because I would just sit there and think about it, because we're the brunt of that attack for something that gives us a bad name that I can do nothing about. So how we can address that, I don't know. But it's a huge difference between private and public, and we're getting uproar right now, majority because of the private property, telling people to get off their beach.
So the county can do something. They can require that any company acting as a security guard label themselves as a security guard. Right now, they're labeled as Joe Blow vendor.
It's still on private property.
It's still private, but the county can regulate the rule on who can tell who what. You just can't have some private citizen telling tourists what to do. I mean, they need to label themselves. They need to have some certification process.
Private property, I mean, you tell your Uncle Joe to go out there and tell him to get off the beach.
Yeah.
I don't see how you can regulate private
You can't
property.
regulate that. It's the agent of the person, no matter how they.
And,
Yeah.
and over the period of time, even the security guard that has the badge and has the word security still deals with
He's a security guard.
more problems than the beach attendant. It's the familiar face that most of the tourists and most of the guests on private property listen to and we deal with. We do have confrontations every once in a while, but it's someone that doesn't like our answer. And our answer is a rule that is posted by the association. So once they understand that rule, everybody usually is in compliance and is taken care of. But the one thing that the county does right now they require all the vendors to attend mandatory meetings. Okay, each year. Well, at least at the beginning of the year. Why not make the main person a mandatory meeting? Why not the HOAs, the rental companies? Those are the people that don't put out the proper information to their guest. They don't.
You're correct.
They don't communicate at all. Here's your unit. Thank you for the check. Enjoy. And it's
Whatever's
them that's the one that needs to get. I'll sit there and try to tell these people left and right, okay, we'll pass it along. It doesn't get passed along. Make these people mandatory to come to meetings. because they're the
Well,
property
can't-
owner that
can't
gives
do
the
that
permission to be
That
on the
speaks to
beach.
your frustration with what I was talking about. I'm not suggesting we just throw our hands up and that nothing can
Oh,
be
I know
done.
you're
It's
not,
just
David.
the fact that when you have to train John Q. Public, whether they're return visitors or brand new visitors, and they come down, they've got this vision and they've got this expectation in their mind that they're going to come down and get to behave a certain way, whether it's pampered, beach picking, trash being picked up after them, that whole range of things that they have in their expectations. The difficult thing we have to consider is whenever we decide on whether it's tents, whether it's this, that, or the other, is our ability to educate and let the public know in very simple terms so that they can be in compliance, so that we can create the most harmony. So we need to keep it simple, and until we get this public-private distinction somewhat resolved, not on one side, it's not a zero-sum game. That's the way that the whole thing's being portrayed right now, is it's almost like a zero-sum game here. But when we get to a point where we can agree that at a community level, and I'm not sure what that's going to look like. That's going to take years to draw out legally, right? So when we get into the minutia of should tents be 6 feet, should they be allowed at all, or anything like that, it's useless to me to make a rule on the public beaches when we can't do the same. If you can't do it across the board on the 26 miles, don't do it.
I agree with that. The public and private beaches is causing a lot of confusion. You go
And there's-
down to the beach and, no, you're not allowed to put a tent up here, but you're allowed to right there and there.
Well,
I
and,
get it.
You
and
know,
that
that's-
isn't what I said, though.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah,
At all, and David, I want to put it on the record, I don't think you, number one, I don't think you were saying, let's throw up our hands and don't do anything.
Well, no, I
Number
understand
two,
where you drew the
you
conclusion.
should-
I was pointing out how difficult
Sure.
it can be.
And at no time should lifeguards be responsible for code enforcement
Why not?
issues.
That's-
And I'm not
I mean-
saying you had to, you just got put in that position. But that's why I do advocate that if we're going to have tent issues every year where we're constantly revisiting, it seems to me that saying we just don't have tents, period, on the beach unless you have a permit and have rules for what you have to do to get a permit. Not saying people can't have one because of special situations or like a bonfire. But no, I don't like that. I don't believe in do as I say, not as I do. I think private property owners should not use tents either unless they're gonna permit them.
So we changed it to 6 by 6. And,
That was
and
a
then, that was our
disaster.
committee.
Yeah,
And then it went to the TDC and then the BCC. So who changed it back to 10 by 10?
the commission.
The
Well,
BCC.
last year through the process, there was, this committee voted, and I have to go back and look and see what the status of that vote was, but when it did get to the BCC, it was determined that the 6 by 6 size tent created more problems than it resolved, and so they went back to a 10 by 10, but they also included it to be contained on the top 1/3 of the
Yeah.
beach. This is all on public beach.
Right.
On
But
private
they
beach,
also
like I
discussed
say,
removing it in full, and the commissioners said they did not want to do that.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
so
They didn't wanna
we're
touch it.
talking about rules that have pretty much
wouldn't-
already been
I wouldn't-
addressed.
Brian, let me ask you this. So when we did the 6 by 6 experiment with the no canopies in, that was 17, and that was disastrous,
Mhm.
I think by all accounts, right? So we went back to this 10 by 10 with the upland third,
Mhm.
right? From your perspective, how has code enforcement felt how much more effective was that going back to that?
Well, so there's different types of effectiveness, okay? So one of the effect that the county commission likes to have is no complaints. And so it was very effective in that. They have not received many complaints this year, nor have we, by the general public, upset about where they can place their tent. As with all new codes, when we enact them, we spend a large amount of time that first year getting people to understand the code, okay? As opposed to meting out hard-handed code enforcement action, all right? So we can count the people, they've set up their tents. We inform them of what the code reads, how it reads, and where they can set their tent, depending on what time of day it is, what the circumstances are underneath the tent. It could be as simple as, if you can move your tent right now, we'd appreciate it. We'll be back in a couple hours, make sure you've done that. Or it could be if it's, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, full family underneath it with all kind of gear. Hey, we'd appreciate tomorrow if you'll set your tent up on the top 1/3 of the beach. So, if we come back next day, they've done it again, they get a citation for it. So we recognize that, you know, code changes do require, I don't want to say a grace period, but it's somewhat of a grace period of educating the public for the common good, for their good, for everybody else's good and all that. And writing tickets doesn't necessarily change that behavior. See what I'm saying?
Especially when you
Yeah.
match
But to your point, I think you made a valid point. I'm not sure if you expressed it correctly. A good code is a code that can be easily enforced and easily understood by the user that is being enforced.
That's correct.
And I think that's the point he was trying to make. And that's what we strive to do. I've learned over the last 4 years that that is a good code, a code that makes or affects the behavior you want, but more importantly is that people can understand it. So we've already got built-in confusion makers, and that is, where do you tell the demarcation lines on the beach where these codes change, okay? And so as we've gone through this, we've recognized that private property people have certain rights from their property that they ought to be able to live by, or they ought to be able to live by, and the public beach has another set of rights. And then with that built-in, you know, confusion of, okay, where is that line? Because we do spend a lot of time with people saying, well, why can they have it down over there? Well, because that's on private property. Well, how do I know where that is? Well, we try to make it clear as we can, but I'm telling you today. And so if you're over here, you can, you know, you may be under a different set of codes, customary use when it existed, right? So it's very confusing. So that's why John has developed an attitude of either allow them or ban them. Don't try to make these different restrictions on different properties. He's going towards that program of making a code easy to understand and easy to enforce. Now, it's hard to do because of our beach ownership relation conditions. So we got to do the best we can. But the other thing I want to add is I wouldn't worry about what's downstream from you. If you feel that it's an effective code revision, I think it ought to be discussed and ought to be voted on, and then whatever status it carries forward with. That way, at least people know that it was talked about, and what this advisory committee's attitude on it is. You know, I wouldn't not worry about it because you say, well, the BCC is going to do this. Because we don't know what the BCC is going to do. And they do take these advisory committee recommendations seriously. That's the first question they asked me. Brian, has this been through your advisory committees? Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am, I asked. What was their status? Well, on this one, they decided they want to talk about it, but they actually did not, or they didn't approve by committee. It actually received either a motion and not a second, or it did receive a second and it was voted no. But those are all important statuses.
Can I back up to something that was brought up about the required meeting? I would like to see a representative from the homeowner or condo association who issues the authorization for a permit for a vendor or the private homeowner be required to attend that meeting with the vendors, so that they understand what the vendor is responsible for, because they're the ones writing the contracts with them, and they're the ones asking them to be security guards or clean up the beach or whatever their requirements are in their contract. And I think they should be required to have some ownership in those rules. Otherwise, they have no ownership if they're not having to participate in any way.
I think that's a good point. I'm not sure how successful we'll be with mandatory, but I think maybe we ought to try with a invitation and couch it as we're trying to make the beach a better place for you, your guest, and other people that come to the beach. I think if we did a mandatory, thing, that we'd get immediate pushback.
Well, that's what they pay these people for, these management companies. They pay them, and I'm talking about their HOA or condo association management, not their rental management companies. The person who manages their condo.
So a lot of time, there are a lot of HOAs here that have a CAM person that's here, and a lot of them do several of them. And, I think a lot of those people understand the rules and all that. We do get into a problem because our industry partners, relations person, as well as our visitor center information specialist, in conjunction with our beach ambassadors and beach code enforcement officers, distribute information to our industry partners. We have a little bit of a disconnect, as in we as TDC are not given a comprehensive list of bed tax collectors,
Yeah.
but we do have a list of industry partners, people that have, hey, I want to be your partner in your industry. And so we try to get all that information out to them. We make all the information available. We bring it to you personally. We explain the benefits of it. And some people just choose that they'll pick and choose what ones they want to display within their units or how they want to communicate that to their guests. Sometimes it's, codes that tell you you can't do something, are deemed not good marketing, and so they don't want to do it.
But I'm speaking to the homeowner or the condo association or the homeowners association who authorizes the permits. You do have a list of those people that have authorized the
We do.
permits.
We have that.
Those people, I believe, if they were required to do something, would have more ownership in what's happening on their beach. And the vendors who are the bad apples, that would weed them out when they came to the meeting and these things were discussed, that these are some of the issues, and then they go, that's in their mind. Otherwise, they've written a contract with the vendor's gonna take care of it. I don't have to worry about it. But if they're required to come to a meeting and they have to listen and they have to go back to their board with a report, which would be required by that board, then the board would then hear. And that way, the homeowners who have, in these areas, have given a permit, understand what that vendor is doing
And
on
I
their
want
beach.
to clarify something, Debbie, because I agree with what you're saying. The issue is everything that is occurring on private beaches that is ruffling the feathers of the public and is not beneficial to the public. It's not against the rules, and the HOA is actually demanding. It may not be a vendor, but either a security guard company or a vendor to do it, and they know that they can. Therefore, them going to these meetings, they're not breaking any rules,
No, but it does inform them about that we want the garbage pickup. It does inform
Sure.
them that these are the rules about how far your chairs are supposed to be apart, how close you're supposed to be.
Sure.
Not just what they're telling them to do about security guards.
Yeah.
They know the whole comprehensive idea where they may have never even looked at the code. All they did was tell that vendor, here's your contract, do your thing.
Sure.
And the homeowners don't know anything because they're not getting a report from the board. I have listings in a subdivision that has a deeded beach access, okay? And I have said, what are your rules? What is your contract? Nobody can tell me
Yeah, that's-
because nobody was required to participate.
Sure.
So if they were required to participate in something they're giving authorization to happen, then I think there would be more ownership in it.
I agree.
Then,
I think he had
All right.
a good point, that an invitation, and maybe that somehow, if we have a list, maybe you send out some of the information to them so that they can at least read through it if they decide not to attend.
That's
That-
probably a good
that
idea.
would
Just
be
send the
a-
meeting
a
minutes or
lighter,
something to the.
friendlier way
that would never
to-
get passed on to the board though. If they
Yeah.
were required to come to a meeting, they would be required to report it to the board. See, otherwise, or if they are invited to a meeting, they'd have to report it to the board and the board would decide if they would go or not.
The question is, can
I
you
think it's a
require them
good
to
idea
attend?
to attempt to get people to be stakeholders. When we first started our Leave No Trace program with the Beach Maintenance Department, we picked up every night. We actually held it for a week and allowed people to come retrieve it. They had to sign a release form and all that. But I took that opportunity to mine information and where we're getting it from. When people call us, hey, y'all got my stuff? Yeah, we got it. You can come get it. When they got there, I'd ask them, where are you staying? Who's your rental company with and all that. And I started seeing a pattern of rental companies because I'd ask them, was there any information displayed in your unit? Were you made aware of these codes? Because a lot of the stuff we would pick up would be not at public beach accesses. It would be just out in front of really smaller resort communities, is what I call them. So I started calling these rental companies, and the number one response I would get is, yeah, we're aware of them, but that's negative messaging. I'm gonna give that to my renter. And I would counter with, well, how negative is it for them to get up the next morning and their tent be gone?
But see, that's a totally different thing. The rental management company
Mm-hmm.
is hired by the homeowner.
Right?
The homeowner has to answer to their board. So if you have the board representative
Mm-hmm.
required, then it trickles down to all those other areas.
Okay, well, we can vote on that. Is it one of the items?
That HOA management is the rental management.
Well, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, it just depends. But that way you
Let's-
catch both of them.
Let's move on. Is there anybody else?
One quick question, and this is for Turtle Watch. Matt, a text has gone out the past 2 days, says we no longer monitoring the beach daily, period. Set up at any time, it is legal. Which that defers back to the 7:30 or whatever rule it is. Yeah, correct. The way you interpret that, a tenant's gonna say it's legal to set up anytime I want. That's. Everybody knows that there's code enforcement rule over a text. Bad apples that'll read this, it should say illegal, correct?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I will.
Right now it says it's legal.
Yeah, right now, we're just checking Nest, but I will talk to Sharon, and, I will have an answer for you or figured out today.
Thanks.
Yep.
And we probably should do what we did last year, where we just set a time of universal clearance.
Yeah, because we're off super, yeah, because we're gonna run back into fall break, but nests are hatching, it's getting close to being done, but I checked the nest at Sandestin the other day, and I was down on the beach, 5-something, and off the beach by 5:30 and back home in bed. So, I mean, we're getting down there and checking them as quick as possible.
Yeah.
So we could definitely come up with a reasonable time and figure it out, and we've had no issues. My phone hasn't gone off in the morning in a week with any kind of vendor issues at all, so it's been running smooth on my end, but, I'll take care of that.
There's nobody here. I mean, my guys come an hour and a half later.
Oh, yeah, so I'll take care of it today.
I have one other thing. You and I have talked about this repeatedly, but, I'll bring it up now. And I know there's a catch-22 here, but, the vendor storage at the outfalls.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of them that are in the outfall. Within the 50-foot undisturbed area, there are actual places for vendors to leave their equipment. I would like to see that removed. I don't. In the 50-foot non-disturbed area, there should be no setups. There should be no storage. And there should be no setups on the berm of an outfall, which we had an agreement, and then when this changed, when we came up with all these rules, that flew out the window.
Okay, so when you say within the 50-foot zone of the coastal dune lake, you're also talking about the outfall?
There is in the coastal dune lake protection zone rules that there is no disturbance within 50 feet of the outfall,
Okay.
on either side, okay? You're not gonna be able to stop the public from doing it. There's no way for them to know they do it. But we should set an example, and there
Mhm.
should be no setups within 50 feet. There should,
Of the outfall?
of the outfall.
Okay.
And there should be no setups on the berm of the outfall. For one purpose, it could be dangerous. Right now, if you're set up on Eastern Lake's outfall, it could open at any time, and you could be set up on it. I have had it happen to me at Western Lake, being set up too close to it, and it opened on its own, because nobody knows when that's gonna happen. Now, we're opening it this morning manually at Eastern Lake,
Mhm.
but, and so you'd be prepared for that, and there's clearance. But other times, it's dangerous to be set up on that natural berm. So I would like to see that happen, and then, the toe of the dune storage area, Eastern Lake is the example I've sent you pictures of, that be moved. And I know you're supposed to have one so close to each access, but it is literally in the water. I mean, most of the time. Those poles are in the water, and their chairs are touching the water, or whatever they leave there.
Okay.
Anybody else have anything?
Yeah, I do. Page 10, 2254 is a really easy one. It's about the bonfire permits. As you know, we changed last year to the cutoff time for bonfire permits being at 1 a.m. The ordinance is still reading on, at the very top, 24-hour permit. We'd just like to strike the 24-hour.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
You got notes on everything? You wanna roll down the list?
I do. Okay, so I'll lay it out as it was talked about, and then you can take it as chairman, as do we have a motion? And then, yeah, I just asked that discussion be fairly minimal, since we discussed a lot of them, and that we just, kind of make a vote on it, and we'll mark what the vote is, or if it progressed through with motion and second and vote, okay?
Should we
All
wait
right,
for David to get
so,
back?
Some of these I'm gonna lump together.
You wanna take a quick break?
Just a quick
Quick
break.
restroom
That'll
break.
Give me a chance to kind of, put things together in one.
Because our rollers get from tower to tower.
One thing I noticed in the meeting on Saturday was that a lot of the property owners got up and complained about vendors in front of their house. I mean, should we make some kind of campaign that, public or private property owners don't have to allow vending in front of their house?
Well, I
I
think
mean-
I think what you heard a lot of was people complaining for other people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
People complain.
for other people.
Oh,
And it was those who did not know what their association chose on their behalf.
Right.
And that's the main thing. I mean, you're gonna have 147 units and a board of 5 that'll make a decision on behalf of that condo. And one owner in there does not like the rules that they set in place. They'll find any public format to sit there and say, hey, if so-and-so's out of control, stay on that.
Like I said, we explained earlier in the meeting that does occur in some situations. It usually occurs where there's an absentee owner that does not have a large, well-versed property management firm representing them. Because you can bet that if somebody don't want vending on their property, they quick let us know.
I don't think most absentee owners are they probably don't care, because, the people that they rent to are probably gonna want
So that's what I'm
vending.
saying, is the people that were complaining that property owners don't know that they can allow or not allow vending, is they're complaining for somebody else on their
They weren't
behalf.
complaining that they didn't know. They were just complaining that the vendors were setting up in front of their property.
And I don't think it
And
was.
it
I
doesn't
don't-
seem like they knew that they could,
well, I don't think- I don't
exclude
think-
them.
Well, once again, I find it hard to believe that in this time period we're in, that private properties don't know what their rights are. I mean, think about that for a second. I'm a private property owner, but I'm gonna complain about the general public being on my property, but I don't know that I complain about a vendor being on my property? That doesn't sound,
A very high-profile homeowner that does not have, is a vacant lot. He even has a camera.
mhm.
They were vending from his property and he had no idea. I reported it because they had left the chairs and
Mhm.
tropical storm was coming. I reported their chairs were left at the toe of the dune. I even asked the vendor, do you have a permit? And he told me he did. And then
Mhm.
when I sent it to y'all, he didn't have a permit. And he was vending right there from that person's property. And that man, pretty much, he's got a camera and he didn't know it.
He didn't
So,
know that, he didn't know that they were
they were
vending?
vending from his property. He had not seen it. And
Okay, so there's a different argument of not knowing they're vending and not knowing that you can tell them they can't vend. Cause that
Well,
was.
Yeah, that's what I was
reason to tell
saying.
them- But the reason to tell them they can't is because they don't know. Like I told you, they don't know.
Well,
A lot of them
that's-
don't.
That's two
Yeah.
different situations. Okay, so,
Yeah, it's far away.
all right.
If they're on social media, they know now, but if they're not on social media, and they're absentee, they just
Right,
don't
right.
realize it.
Okay, so we had a lot of discussion. Some of it all, it was going back and forth on some of the same topics. And so I've condensed it down into the main sections. And the first one is dogs, 2231. And the discussion centered around the time allowed for dogs. And so, at this point, Mr. Chairman, you should make asking if anybody has a motion as to that effect.
I'd like to
Okay.
make, oh,
Well, it was the time, right?
Right.
Did we have, you wanna make a motion on the time?
so I'll make a motion, I'd like to make a motion that between 3:30 and 8 AM, that you don't have dogs on the beach.
For quick discussion's sake, I don't have a dog. People who do have a dog and utilize this privilege, are they for or against that?
Okay, normally you have to make a
Have a
second to
second
have
first.
discussion.
Yeah, second. Do we have a second?
I second.
We have a second. No, discussion. I usually I don't like to take my dog down in the middle of the day. It's hot. I take her down early in the morning, late in the afternoon.
So you would say,
I mean, it'd be nice to be able to stay on till maybe 9.
what is the current rule?
It changes
Eight-
depending on daylight.
8 to
savings time.
3, or 8 to 4, and then 9 to 3.
We're just trying
Is
to
that
clear
it?
confusion
Yeah,
of the daylight savings timing, not when if you
So it's
can.
very similar to whatever it is right now.
yeah. We're just talking about splitting the
Half
difference, I
hour.
think.
That's all I need to know.
8:30, 3:30? You said 8 to 3:30.
I said 8, but I mean, I'm not. if
Well, it's
it would
between
make it
3 and
different-
4 and 8 and 9, right? So let's
Right.
split the difference,
Right.
8:30 to 3:30.
I'm game to split the difference
So
if
you're
we can
amend-
have one.
You're amending,
I'll amend my motion to 3:30 PM to 8:30 AM, no dogs on the beach.
and I'll
No,
second.
that's when they're allowed.
Dogs
I'm
allowed.
sorry, no, not.
3:30
oh, yeah,
PM to
I'm sorry,
8:30
I'm
AM.
sorry, you're right, they're
So, and
allowed
I'll-
at night,
And
yeah,
Okay.
I'll second
Evening
that
at- right.
amendment.
okay,
Okay,
thank you. Yeah, that.
we have a
that would
motion
mess
and a
up things.
second.
Oh,
So I'm
boy.
still-
Dogs are allowed on the beach from 3:30 PM to 8:30 AM.
Got it.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries. No.
No, we're all in favor. It was unanimous, I think. Did anybody? No.
He
Abstained, okay.
Okay, the next ones deal with 2254 fires, and there was a discussion of striking some language that stated 24 hours. We had actually changed the code last year to be off by 1, so I think that there should be a motion made to strike the 24-hour verbiage.
Make a motion to strike the 24-hour.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Unanimous.
Take care of Stacy, she's important.
All the next ones deal with beach vending, 2260, and the first one would be 2260B1, under permit requirements, include property representative and mandatory pre-season vending meeting.
Say that one more time.
Have under permit requirements that for specific place permits to include property representative and mandatory pre-season vending meeting. So right now, we require any vendors to be in the pre-season meeting. The recommendation or the discussion about this was to include a property representative that has, you know,
Responsibility.
authority
Contract.
to authorize the permitted vendor to apply.
So I'll make a motion that we include, but not be mandatory at this time,
Okay.
a representative of the entity or person authorizing the permit for vending be included in any correspondence as well as the mandatory meeting. But it's not mandatory for them.
Right.
The beginning of the year meeting.
Okay.
Mandatory vendor meeting.
Second.
Yes.
I'll second it.
That was a mouthful. Okay, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
I like the way you did these in order of the ones you thought would go the quickest. You're doing a good job, Ron.
I'm hoping that, I'm hoping all of them go quick. We've already
We
discussed.
discussed it all.
Yeah, all right, next one is 2260D, which is general operations of beach vending. And first one is 15 feet from the water's edge. to make it universal. And so right now, that exists on public beach, it does not exist on private beach, so this would be a motion to include it on private beach, 15 feet from the water's edge.
Yeah, I mean, that's a safety issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, that should be all.
I make the motion that we, the entire beach, that there be 15 feet from the water's edge for any kind of setups.
That's gonna be hard to enforce.
I'll second that, yeah.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
In a second, any discussion?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
Next one is storage, and the first part of it is private. And so on private or specific place permits, we allow the permitted vendor to have storage boxes, and they must be a certain size and then a certain distance apart and a certain orientation. The discussion centered around increasing the distance between the storage boxes. So I think there should be a motion that states that the frequency increases and to what frequency it should be.
I make a motion that we increase the separation to 20 feet. Everything else, as far as I know,
It would stay the same.
as good as we're gonna get right now.
Do we have a second?
Okay,
I'll second it. I guess, I don't think 20 feet I don't think doubling it is feasible.
Right,
Going from 10 to, so I don't know if we ask for 20 and then maybe they'll compromise and go to 15, so I don't have a problem.
Well, we need to put it in the code what we want, so,
Oh, okay.
How
I
about-
mean, we can't say 20 and
Well,
enforce
you can second it
15.
and then let's discuss,
Yeah.
because I'm interested on your perspective, because
Well, the discussion part, I just think 20 feet, and I'm on Turtle Watch, so I mean,
yeah.
I know most of my group would say, let's get all boxes off, but I just try to be realistic also and just try to look at things, what's feasible. I don't know if we're gonna go from 10 to 20 and anyone's gonna pass it.
if I amend it to 15, would that make a
I
difference?
don't know how it works, if we
Once
get sometimes
again-
to ask for more,
Which-
and
hey,
it's,
Matt.
you know,
Once again, I wouldn't worry about what downstream's gonna happen.
just
I
ask.
think
for
you
more.
ought to do it on what you feel here today.
I mean, if it makes I'll amend my motion to 15 feet if that helps for more people to feel, on this committee, to feel like that's reasonable.
How many boxes are allowed per vendor?
They're allowed as many that will fit on there with
With
the
space.
10-foot spacing and the
Okay.
length of their property.
So there will
Okay.
definitely be some hard pushback.
Well, that's why I said there's gonna be hard to push at, because I know there are beaches that are big, but I know there are beaches, once again, I'm definitely not taking it with the vendor here, just being realistic, that there's gonna be a huge pushback, going, well, I have to take 3 boxes off. We can ask for it. I mean, if they say, I'd be great, I don't care if some boxes have to come off, I'm all for it.
Yeah,
I just wanna make sure that we're asking for something.
it's about 30 sets.
Well, we're
30 sets
just
per box.
making recommendations now, so it goes to the TDC and the BCC.
Let's ask for it, let's just decide on.
So we need
Well,
to
and the
decide what we think is,
Yeah, the
Right.
vendors are very good at pushing back on the things that they really feel are unreasonable, so,
Very plain.
they're adaptable, they're very adaptable.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying they're not agreeable, but the ones that have a real issue with something are not, they're not opposed to saying it in the vendor meetings. Okay, so I've amended the motion to be 15 feet.
Okay, so did we have, okay,
I'm amending it to be 15 between them instead of 20.
so can I ask this question, would you, if we were to space them further apart, would we be agreeable to add, say, 2 feet to the box?
Yeah.
So that it gives them more space, but further apart?
All the boxes are 4x8 generally because it's super easy
To
for,
build.
to make. 'cause it
Yeah,
goes
it's
in
4 by 8
roll.
sheets of
Yeah.
plywood.
Well, I get that, but,
Yeah, I don't
And,
think that's
and the
a
question to you would be, would 20 feet be unreasonable?
I don't have, I mean, speaking on behalf of a vendor, we don't have a beach like a Rosemary watercolor.
That's what I wanted to ask about.
You know, Pompano Joe's, the big beaches are the ones that would say, if you go look at watercoloring, it's box, box, box. If I were just shooting from the hip, I think they're at least 15 feet for the most part apart from each other.
So let's
Already.
shoot for 20.
So, I mean, you can try, I don't think it's gonna kill anybody personally.
I'm thinking of Seascape. where they have multiple boxes, and I know that they keep,
Well, they use a vehicle at Seascape,
right.
which that's another discussion.
Would there be, I know one of the concerns, or Matt, you brought that up, and I know Dave kind of addressed it. For those larger resorts that are gonna give us the pushback on this kind of thing, can you allow for a couple to be bunched up? Because that's 30 sets, if I'm recalling.
Correct.
You're eating 30 sets on a box, is what I remember.
And again,
So-
this is in the name of Turtles, and if he generally feels like 15's fine, I think 15's a reasonable number. But I think anything's fine, to be honest.
For those who may be adversely affected, would it be okay to have two boxes bunched together, which creates the 8 foot, if it's on an area that the Turtle Watch, after having consulted the particular property, or per that season, and saying, okay, based on the nest patterns that we're seeing this year, is that too much of a pain in the ass?
I
So
think you just,
Pardon my language.
I think it is, I think you just decide, boxes stay the same size, if we wanna decrease the distance, we ask for it, and if not, then the distance stays the same, but I think we try to keep it as simple as possible, and just go with it. The more I thought about it, I think just let's ask for 20, cause I think the pushback then would be like, well, let's meet in the middle, if we ask for 15, they may say 10's fine,
Exactly,
so let's go
But-
big. and-
Well, can you describe that property without, you don't, if you don't wanna name it, I get it, but can you describe what they have? Because I've never seen a property that was, if the beach was small, then they only have so much room to do setups anyway. If the beach is big, they got, so much room, so
Well, there's just a lot of boxes, I think John to describe, there's a lot of boxes, a lot of them are, if they're any 10 feet, it's probably closed, and then there'll be just a group where there's 3 bunched together, and then, like I said, it wasn't just the space, it was the space in between the boxes, and like you said, there's already a rule, that's just enforcement,
yeah,
so,
that one, yeah.
so yeah, where there's just junk in between it, which negates the space.
Is
in the
this
first
like a
place.
condo complex or something?
Big resort,
Oh, big resorts, okay.
yeah, I can talk to you afterwards, but.
Yeah,
like I said, it's
no,
already
I
in place.
get why you don't wanna name, and I get that, so I'm just trying to understand better why they would have so many chairs that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna go with
Okay,
20.
20,
Well,
okay.
let me ask-
We got a
Okay.
motion.
I got
and a second.
one more question for Matt. Matt, so do you think right now, like you've pointed out that with the 10 foot, that 10 foot is being occupied with kayaks and other detritus?
Each year I see more and more stuff, yeah, getting filled in.
Do you
as soon as
think that
gaps.
if you're to get, let's say for the sake of argument, you get the 20, do you think that will actually help alleviate that? Because it'll,
That's a code enforcement, I think that's
Yeah.
gonna be
Yeah.
yes.
I would remind everybody that, you wanna make a code that's easy to understand and easy to enforce, and doesn't require us to make judgment calls on permit applications, okay? So just set a distance and, be comfortable with it, and we'll see how it goes.
So do I need to make a motion
Mhm.
20 feet apart and no other,
No, because that's
Storage
already.
at that dune between them?
simple.
Anyways.
that is not
Yeah,
allowed
right.
anyway? Okay, okay, so 20, I'll
All right.
put it to 20. Sorry, Stacy.
We have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carries unanimous.
Okay, all right. The next one would be storage at public beach accesses. And so, general, right now, we allow storage at the toe of the dune, provided the equipment is to be rented the next day. And because of weekly or annual contracts, they meet that requirement. So the discussion would be, motion would be to change how we manage storage at the toe of the dune at public beach accesses. And then a second component, which should be a second consideration or motion, would be even further restrictions at public beach accesses that are associated with coastal dune lakes, okay? So the first one would be, in general, vendor storage at the toe of the dune.
Can I ask a question? Are we talking about public regional accesses, or are we talking about
We're talking
any
about-
public?
talking about any
neighborhood?
Any public beach access. And when I say public beach access, we have our ones we own, regional beach accesses. We have ones we own on neighborhood beach accesses. And we also have some public beach accesses that we have easement on. And that could be, when I say own, we own the property outright, or we own it as a road right-of-way. And then the third condition is on an easement across private property. So, in general, we don't have too much issue with storage on the beach accesses that are on easement. Because a lot of those now are under a specific place permit, because the vendor has gone and got a specific place permit for the piece of property that the easement exists on. And so they honor the easement area as for general public to set up on, and in some cases, they even allow vendors to set up there. But there's no storage at the toe of the dune there. But in general, it would be at all public beach accesses. How do we want to address storage at the toe of the dune? Leave it as it is, prohibit it, or have some sort of limited storage capability. And that would be in the form of, we could designate a certain number of boxes that could be there, and there may be availability for all the vendors that vend there to have a box, or there may have to be a system of the lottery of who gets a box, or there may be a system where the industry could agree to share a box.
So for discussion's sake, we beat this horse dead 3 years in a row, and it goes down the list every time. It's the same argument that Mr. Bryan was saying about trash collection. I think it is a major safety issue of carrying tons of chairs. Again, vendors are not going to let you could do whatever, but people wanting chairs, even if it's private property, is going to stay because that's what people want. I think it's a safety issue to be going up and down the boardwalk every day with spiky umbrellas and chairs that weigh 8 to 10 pounds each. I think it's a wonderful system right now. Is there a lot of stuff on the beach for 3 months a year at the toe of the dune? Yes, there is, on public beach accesses. But if you were to go down to the beach right now, there are very few chairs stacked on public beaches at the toe of the dune. And if you were to go with a box or a rack or anything of that nature, it's going to stay there year round, and it's got to be big enough to accommodate what we really need for those 3 months of the year. So it's going to be a ton of boxes and storage. I personally believe it is the best system right now for what we have. And public beaches are a small percentage compared to private. Private's always going to have their boxes and store their stuff outside a box if they want, regardless. So we're talking about a small percentage that I believe for liability and safety is absolutely the best way it could be, and I don't think there should be a change.
Do you think it's the best system because it's for you guys, it helps you guys out? That's
I
why you
think-
say it's the best system.
I
If
think
we're going from the
for-
sea turtle organization, the best system for us would be to have less things at the toe of the dune,
Sure.
since it's where they nest. So
Every occupation has inherent risk.
So I'm
I mean, you
speaking-
could be a
I'm
lumberjack.
speaking, I understand what you're saying, and I'm not speaking to that. I'm speaking directly to the safety of
employees, your workers.
not employees, yes, but even more so of our employees, the people that we don't even know who they are in such a litigious society that you can get sued for anything. The same exact thing that why Brian said 30 minutes ago, he doesn't want to have his trash guys going up and on the boardwalk for safety. We don't want to have that, and it is a safety issue for our own guys, but I'm saying in general, it's not sightly, it's not safe.
Well, a second question for you also with storage of the dune is, the stuff's left at the toe of the dune, but it's not secured in any manner, it's just
It's
stacked up.
locked. It's
Some,
locked.
but is that mandatory that these things have to be locked? It's not mandatory, right? So
Well,
I
what
think,
happens is you get somebody, and this happens, somebody will go grab your chair, because you already broke it down at 5:30. They go sit in at sunset to have a good time, and guess what? We get an email or a call at 11:15 p.m. and we get a $500 ticket.
my number one excuse from vendors when I talk to them, when it's like, I call about early setup or I see chairs out, the number one thing I get is, someone must have just struck it down. And not everyone locks it, so then I go, well, if you care so much about your
But
chairs.
we get a ticket.
Okay.
Right, so it's not mandatory that they lock it, but a lot of them do. We allow them to put posts at the toe of the dune to secure their
So
equipment.
can we try to make it mandatory?
We could make it mandatory, yeah.
Every
Yeah.
company that I know
But
does.
I'll be honest with you, most of them do it just for that reason, because they don't want to get.
Well, then it won't affect them.
No, and
You
very,
don't need
very,
a post to lock it, and I don't think that should be
very few
even
people
have
use
it.
that.
You take these big long locks and wrap them around them.
Yeah.
And again, I as a vendor am very motivated to make sure my guy locks it. We have our guys take pictures every day when they break down a chair, for that reason that we can say, hey, Mr. Jeff, we locked it. Here's a picture. And that obviously never happens. What happens is we get a call. It got left out overnight. We talk to our guy, and he's like, oh, I forgot the lock. and we get a big ticket, which is not what we want. So there's a system in place that we don't want this to happen already. And again, my argument is, you put a box down there, you know, I've already spoken about going up and down, but you put a box down there, it's gonna be down there 12 months a year. I think that chairs leave when it's not used the next day, and you will get a ticket if you leave it down there. I understand it's not the best for everyone, and there's not a perfect solution to this, but
Yeah, boxes are not friendly to,
sure.
because they collect the rats and things that would be around there.
Sure.
Other, things will pile garbage in there.
Yes, sir.
They're not-
Okay.
Personally, I don't like the boxes or the chairs, but, I mean, we
But
gotta
I-
have a medium.
I do see
Something.
that this would be a liability for the county at public accesses, for them to be carrying these chairs up and down the same steps that the public is using to come up and down. Not only a liability for them, but it's also a liability for the county if someone is injured. They're not only gonna sue them, they're gonna sue the county, and so I think that it should stay as it is for that
Okay.
purpose, for that reason. I don't agree with anything being left on the beach, but for that
Okay.
purpose at public accesses,
Okay.
that's the only.
Okay, so for a code to stay as it exists, that would mean there'd be no motion required. So I think at this point, Chairman, you could ask, is there any motion? You wanna make it mandatory to have security?
Have them locked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing that's frustrating to me is, I realize that we're not supposed to, and probably can't discriminate, but, you know, it's one thing to have vendor chairs that are very neatly stacked and locked, that are at the toe of the dune. Not that I like that, I'm like everybody else, I wish everything left the beach at night. But the thing that really becomes an issue is everybody and his brother sees things stacked at the toe of the dune. Next thing, you've got, you know, pink swans and, you know, that are these
We
humongous
have a code
things.
against that.
What's that?
We have a code against general public not storing their equipment at the toe of the dune, at public beach accesses, or in the dune system.
Oh, we've got
But-
that now?
It's-
I think she's saying it's causing confusion there.
But they
Say
walk
that-
up and they see a stack of chairs, they're like, well, this must be where everybody puts them.
Yeah, but what
So-
those
You know?
people are
Is
doing.
it, can you do that on private property too? If somebody, cause see, no private property owner needs to be leaving stuff at the toe of the dune.
No, they can have there's a permit system for them to leave them.
They
Yeah,
can
so-
take
so-
it up beyond, you know, like, let's say my walkover, okay? I can take mine right behind.
So
So,
let's talk about, so on private, on public property, we don't allow anybody to store general equipment, general
Right.
public to store equipment. And so what we do is we remove it in the early morning when we go down to service those garbage cans.
okay,
On private property, we would not know if it's the property owners or not. And so, no, we can't have a code against them storing stuff at the toe of the dune. They're allowed to do that by code. You know, right now, I mean, you know, what it says is you can't leave stuff on the flat sandy portion of the beach.
yeah, okay.
So private property, they can store their stuff at the toe of the dune,
Toe of the dune.
anything they want. There's no limit, just whatever they have.
There's certain things in there to describe large things, all right, so remember how the code reads exactly.
Where is it? What page?
2254,
I mean, I thought this was the code, but I get a million text messages every morning during the season from volunteers, and I try to explain to them, like, that's private, and so I wanna be clear so I can pass this along, so I can. there's confusion
Clear as
there.
mud.
so
Well,
hang on,
that's a problem.
it is,
The whole
22
private, public and private thing, I mean, it just,
Hang on,
without customer.
okay,
use, we don't know
2254
regulate
G,
anything
it's on page
private
11 of
property.
32. Personal property on the beach between 1 hour after dusk and 1 hour after sunrise. And
Oh,
then it
okay.
goes through, all right, so there's a couple key words in there. The beach. Beach is defined as between the toe of the dune and the water's edge. All right, so the toe of the dune is not necessarily a single line, it's a zone, okay, toe of the dune. And what we consider is anything that is landward of the foot of the boardwalk or sand fencing, stuff like that. People have made a reasonable effort to get their private property, their private equipment on their private property up to what's called the toe of the dune.
Okay.
but
I
we
knew
did-
that applied to like signs and things that were out on the beach, but that means
And so,
they
yeah,
cannot leave that stuff at the
Well-
toe of the dune anymore then.
they can on
They
private
can.
property. Not on
Not
public
on
property.
beach.
So that's not, the toe of the dune's not considered still on the beach.
No.
I know it's a dividing line, but
Yeah. What I'm saying is people would like to make it a single line and say, you can store equipment at the toe of the dune or not on the beach. The problem is then they say, well, you can't store stuff in the dunes. And so the toe of the dune is actually a zone. And in that zone to us is if you're landward of your most seaward point of your boardwalk system. In other words, you received a permit to put a boardwalk down there. And so, and then you're not up in the dune with your stuff, you're in that area, then you have made a reasonable effort to get the stuff off the beach.
okay.
And that's how we used to do leave no trace. That's how we still do it with code enforcement. But on private property, to resolve the issue of people just storing their stuff and cluttering up the private beach, or the public beach accesses, we actually prohibited any storage of general equipment at the toe of the dune or in the dune system.
All right, let's move on. Do we want to make a motion to secure we're gonna leave the chairs down at the toe of the dune. Do we want to make a motion to secure them? Okay, we have a motion to secure the chairs. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor say aye. Those
Okay.
opposed, motion carries.
All right, second part of this, or another part of storage, is specific or particular restrictions at public beach accesses that are associated with a coastal dune lake outfall. And so the discussion included including the existing CDL protection zone requirements, which include no disturbance within 50 feet, and then no setup adjacent to the, immediately adjacent to the outfall,
Or own it on the
or,
berm.
or,
On the
or on the
berm.
outfall.
On the outlet, what would we call it,
It is
the Gulf,
The
berm
berm in
or
between
something?
the outfall and the Gulf.
Yeah, the berm between the outfall
Yeah.
and the Gulf. Okay, so, I'll make a motion that there be no, storage of vendor equipment or any storage within the 50-foot outfall to be consistent with the Coastal Dune Lake Protection Zone rules. And also add to that there be, no vendor setups within 50 feet or on the berm of any outfall of a coastal dune lake.
Well, within 50 feet covers the berm. Right.
Well, it does, well,
I mean,
you
you're right in
gotta,
front
if you're
of
not
it.
specific, they'll use a loophole.
Okay, so no setups or vendor storage within 50 foot of the lake outfall or the berm.
To be consistent with the coastal dune lake protection zone rule of no disturbance.
Okay. That's our motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Anybody have any discussion? All
Only
in-
discussion I would have is that, at Eastern Lake, they'll pretty much do away with any vending.
That's right.
She's
You
honest.
can bend this way, and you can bend that way if you have a permit, but that area, you know, you'd have to get a permit with the private homeowner. 50 feet's not a long way. It
And
really
does-
isn't.
So does that mean, like, this would apply to all the outfalls, right, Debbie?
Mhm.
And does that mean then that, because I have a house by one, if my renters wanted vendor chairs, they would just need to make sure that
It
they're
was
50 feet
50
away,
feet
which is
from-
very doable.
That's right.
Okay,
That's right.
okay.
That's right. The only people that are gonna have a problem with this is water sound. Because they'll have to be 50 feet up from the outfall.
Public beach accesses that this could affect would be Western Lake, Eastern Lake. Any others?
Right, now, and so now are we talking about public beach or are we
I'm
talking
talking about
about?
anywhere,
You're talking about all?
anywhere that there is a coastal dune lake outfall.
Now, that's gonna be fun down at Stallworth
But you
Lake,
can't,
because nobody really,
but we can't make that ruling on private property, right?
don't
Yes,
do any
it's
vending
it's
down there, do
already
they?
in the code. I'm
But as
just
far, I'm
making,
just saying, us as a
Like,
board, we
Yeah,
can't make a
should be
rule on
public.
what can and can't happen on private property or something like that, can we?
no, we're.
I understand with
County,
public beaches.
county
Yes.
code can affect private property.
What we're saying is that our ordinance is consistent with the coastal dune lake protection
Right,
zone
yeah.
rules.
Okay.
That's what we're basically saying,
Yes, ma'am.
and it's not happening now.
David, let me ask you this, when it says disturbances, what is that defined as?
Well, actually, there's not supposed to be anything happening there, no disturbance of any kind. So you have to decide what that disturbance would be. So disturbance of the sand, just like if you're not supposed to disturb within your buffer in the coastal dune lake protection zone, or the other 60% of your property, you're not supposed to be disturbing. You're not supposed to be digging, planting. It says encouraging public activity.
Really?
And they're writing code enforcement, not your beach code enforcement, but county code enforcement, is writing violations currently for people who have encouraged public activity in their buffer. So it's any public activity is a disturbance.
Okay.
So if you were encouraging volleyball, if you were encouraging lawn darts, anything.
So is it necessary to make a rule where even the general public shouldn't be within the 50 feet?
Well, it is, but I don't know how we would enforce that, but without signage. We already have signage that they're not supposed to dig,
Who's
which is a state, and it's a huge sign, but they still do it. But I mean, I would like to see that there is no disturbance, period, no activity within 50 feet. But,
Well, kids love to play
and
in
that,
it.
and
Absolutely
they're
love
going
to
to get
play
in it. I mean,
Yeah.
we're,
Well, it's
But-
safer too.
but what I'm saying is, we should be an example. The county, at least in their ordinance with what they're controlling, should be an example. Instead of, do as I say, not as I do, So if they know the vendors can't set up there, then they'll follow suit, just like with the trash. If they know the trash doesn't belong here, they won't do it.
In time. Yeah.
In time,
Yeah,
in time.
Okay, so y'all have a motion and a second?
All those in favor, say aye.
I'll abstain on this one.
Those opposed?
Did you get Philip, Stacy? David and Philip said no. Don't mean to point you out.
No, no,
but
that's
she's
fine.
gonna be accurate.
No, I have no problem.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I
Yeah.
noticed just at this meeting, there's been a lot of abstention from votes. And you need to vote for, unless there's a reason why you're not voting, you need to vote, whether it's a yes or a no. So I was just trying to email Clay Atkinson just to kind of get a definitive answer before I came up here to address the committee. But from my consultation with him in the past, for the TDC meetings, you need to, and if you are going to abstain, you need to state why you're abstaining. So we might need to just kind of look at this moving forward, that we vote yes or no, and if there is a reason, then we need to kind of discuss that.
Yeah, most of my abstains were because of state policies.
Okay,
So I abstain because I'm representing the
Okay.
state part.
then that's fine.
So
I think he was the only one except just now, right?
Just now,
I
right, and
abstained
that-
because I wasn't even, I was rude and had to take a call. What was the motion? Could you restate the motion?
that doesn't qualify.
Okay, I concede.
Okay.
So
Thank
I'll be happy to vote.
If I can clarify one thing, the water can be traversed. The water in the outfall can be traversed by a flotation device. That's all in here. All of that is in here.
And the
What about
coastal dune lake
truck?
In the
protection zone.
coastal dune lakes. The trucks cannot go in the coastal dune lake outfall
Um,
unless they are traversing the beach in the, what do you call it, the track? What is it called? The rack zone.
Okay.
That's it.
Oh.
Because we had some garbage men that were driving all the way over the outfall to get to the garbage instead of himself walking through it. So you can go across, yes, but not,
We try not to because those things are notorious for eating.
Yeah, well,
they
what-
eat my ATVs.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So,
I don't know what. Could you restate the motion?
Yes,
You want-
restate the motion.
Okay, the motion was that there be no, storage of vendor chairs or anything.
setups.
Or setups within the 50-foot, of the, outfall, to make it consistent with the coastal dune lake protection zone language, or on the berm, to clarify that there is no setups on the berm.
Change your vote?
Yes. Aye.
So this would include vending and/or general public?
No, that's just vending and setups.
No, I would say general public, yes, and if you're gonna enforce it, that'd be great.
I'm against that if it's
I
general
think they would
public,
follow.
because
I think
there's a
that-
lot of kids, that's a safety issue, a lot of kids like to play in the lakes.
Oh, no, they
The
can
outfall.
play in the outfall. The
How do they get
water,
How do they
She's
get
saying
to the
they can't
outfall?
set
They
their
can't get in
couch,
that.
There's
set
no-
up their chairs,
there's
park
no
their
setup in
trucks.
the sand.
That's
Yeah.
what I think she's saying.
Right.
So,
The
a
motion-
family can't set up right there and watch their kids play in the dune lake right there next to them. So, I mean,
And they
so they
don't
gotta
really do
play
that
out in
now.
the,
They don't really do that now.
at Western Lake they do, they all set up there and let the kids play in the
Well,
lake.
Yeah, if you want the motion to pass, you gotta make it so that people will vote for it.
I think,
Okay.
I think the
So if it's
general
just the
public, to
vendors-
have the kids
The
and
motion
stuff
is
in
stated
the
included
lakes.
only the vendors, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
included the
Okay.
vendors, yes.
That's
So
why I
the-
asked for clarification.
Yeah, the motion was only for vendor setups and
Okay.
storage.
And I think the public will follow suit, that's what I'm saying, once they see
Okay,
our example.
motion and a,
Well, the problem is if a vendor set up on the berm and they're trying to drive their trucks through, y'all are blocking, you know, and that's what
Well-
people don't realize, there's a danger. There's a huge danger by setting up. on
Well,
the
we got
berm.
the 15-foot zone too, so that's gonna kind of preclude a little bit of
Okay.
that. Sometimes that berm.
No, the
pretty
berm
narrow.
is the berm, period.
Yeah, but it's, a lot of times it's only 15 feet.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay,
they
let's
set
move
up
on.
it anyway.
so we have them, we had.
We voted.
Yep, we're good.
I
Okay,
changed my
And
vote.
David
He changed
Aye.
his
Yes.
vote.
Yeah.
okay, all right. Okay, moving on, public beach access. There was a lot of discussion about how to manage, vendors on a public beach access, and it all really comes down to, some sort of managed vendor program. Okay?
Yeah.
So, should be appropriate this time to, ask if there's a motion for, and it can be specific as to how that managed vendor program would work, or leave it as it is now with the way we manage multiple vendors on any public beach.
Can we discuss, or does there have to be a motion to discuss?
We have to
Yeah, we have to have a
motion.
motion.
Well, you have to have a motion and a second to discuss, but so in our initial, or our discussion earlier today, formulating recommendations, there was many, descriptions of how to manage vendors on the public beach. And really what it all comes down to is what would be called a managed vendor program. And so, there's obviously a lot of components to that. So I think at this point, you would say, or you would, if you feel so inclined, is to make a motion to establish and define a managed vendor program on public beach accesses. You could limit it to regional beach accesses at first, and allow what's going on at neighborhood beach accesses. You could say at all beach accesses.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we have a managed vendor program at all regional accesses and those ones that have over 100 feet of beach. Aren't there 2 or 3 of those?
There it is. Mm-hmm.
And that the first choice management be first come, first serve. Do you want me to be more specific than that? Because I have
Yeah.
plenty of ideas, but
Yeah, no, I think just really, you don't think you have to include the first come, first serve. I think it'd be a managed vendor program. And second part of that could be pending defined vendor, or allowed vendor practices.
We already have a management program, don't we?
I mean, is it?
Over the
that
past
what
couple of years, there has been lots of discussion about a managed vendor program. It's never made it through approval. But yes, there are a couple of different forms of what this program would look like, how it would be, first, how it would be decided what vendors can vend on the beach or have the right to vend there, how they would operate with on the beach, and how the contract would, how the agreement would be between the county and the vendor. Those are the three main components. Who gets to do it? How are they gonna do it? And how is the compensation between the two parties?
We
The
currently have
consideration.
that right now, answered all three of those questions.
Well, so so there's many different ways that, okay, first, how do you select who gets to do it? Okay? It could be lottery, it could be bidding, it could be, those are the two main ones. And then how the program is administrated, that has many components to it, but one of them being, how do they manage the individual sets on the beach?
Well, I'm gonna
Alright.
add this to it then, that there, in order to achieve first come, first serve, there must be an attendant present during operating hours. Because, and whether every vendor that vends there wants to have an attendant, whether the vendors want to combine and pay an attendant that's not an employee of any one vendor, but maybe your association or something. See, I think the vendors are very smart, capable people. They have turned this business into big business. They can figure this out. If we say you have to do first come, first serve, and you have to have an attendant to accomplish that, I guarantee you they'll figure out how to make it work, won't you?
I think that might put some of the smaller businesses out of business if they
I
have
mean,
to
if
have an attendant.
we get to a point of discussion, I'm gonna need an hour to give you guys the pros and cons. I mean, I've spent hours meeting with every single commissioner with a PowerPoint presentation explaining why this is bad for our county. There's one vendor, one in the entire county, who wants the beaches bid out. One. The reason being, they will spend more money than anyone else, and they're not in business to make money. They want their brand to be everywhere, and they're the only people who want to do it. I think it's terrible. There's not enough money in several of these regional beach accesses to have an attendant. That's another problem. Let's say I want it, and I gave the county a bunch of money, and then on top of that, I had to pay for a guy. What kind of service are our tourists going to get when I'm in a business that doesn't make money? I'm gonna stop there because I can go on and on and on. But if there's anything I'm vocal about, it's going to be this issue. Sure, of course, is it bad for me? Yes. I mean, I'll be completely honest. It's bad for me, but I can give you 100 reasons why it's bad for our tourists and it's bad for our county. If it's about paying the county more money, somebody make a motion to make the fee higher. I don't have a problem with that.
But that's not
Sure.
the problem. The problem is the presets. The problem is there's all these chairs sitting out there. I'm not saying they're
Sure.
not paid for,
Yes, ma'am.
but they're empty, and too much of the day.
Sure.
And believe me, it happens even on private beach. There are people that'll bring down, umbrellas and chairs, or they'll bring down tent or whatever it is, and they'll set it up at 7:30 in the morning, and they won't break it down again until sunset or after, and they might only be on the beach for 3 hours.
Are we in discussion? Are we in discussion?
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be rude.
Okay.
It's just that this is
We're
a
not
very
even
complex.
supposed to
Yeah.
be discussing
Right,
it
you're
without a
right,
second.
you're right.
Okay, so you have a motion?
Do we have a motion?
We have a motion, but I'm not sure,
Okay.
just to have a beach management, a vendor management program, doesn't really say what it's gonna look like, we're just gonna
No.
have a program.
Right.
So
I would say that, at this point, that, you're right, there's a lot of discussion on how does the managed program look? How does it, first, we decided, how does it look, and how is the compensation for it? So,
I think we need
This-
to determine the program before we implement a
we're fixing
program.
to have workshops, right, with them. So could we, I think that the motion should be that we would look for a program
Mhm.
and table our final decision until after those workshops have been completed to see what we can get for the public and what we can get for the vendors, and then make a more detailed motion as to what we want the program to look
Okay,
like.
can I ask this, would we, even if we came up with one after all that feedback, would we even have time to implement such a process for the 2019 year?
You know, possibly, you know, once again, I can't speculate on how the BCC would make a decision on it. One of the scenarios I have proposed in the past is that let's go ahead and formulate this or develop it and give it a year to implement it. And that way, people that want to participate in it because they think that they can make money at it will have opportunity to, and then those that don't want to do it, they can decide to do something different.
Okay, I'll
Because-
withdraw
because-
my motion
Once
then.
again, we're talking about the public beach accesses. We're not talking about anything private, so we're talking about a very small segment of
Right.
beaches.
And the most critical segment, in my mind, for people that, you
Right.
know, aren't using, you know, other smaller, like the neighborhood beaches are typically used by the neighborhoods, you know, that surround them.
Yeah, so maybe the motion is, to explore, a managed vendor program at regional beach accesses and public beaches that have greater than 100 feet.
Okay, I'll make that motion, but then I have another one too,
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a
to
second?
explore it.
Anybody wanna make a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor
Well,
say
so now you have time for discussion, if there is,
Okay,
if there
any
is to
more
be any more
discussion?
discussion.
I think we discussed
Any
it. Got it.
any more
And I guess
discussion?
the intent of that would be, we go through all these workshops, and then our next meeting, we then
We'll
spend most
formulate
of the time
something.
formulating
So
something.
that should be part of the motion. That should be part of the motion.
Yeah, to formulate it at the next meeting, or what
Yeah,
would that be,
to explore,
November?
so keep in mind, so we would be at the start of the exploration,
Okay,
okay? Because there'd be a couple other committees and workshops, and then TDC,
yeah,
and then BCC would be, you know,
okay,
final.
Stacy, if you would add to
Right.
be
Right.
discussed.
And there's a distinct possibility that, as we go through this first round of code revisions, that this one doesn't make it through to the end, and we don't do anything again for this year, and then maybe look at it again next year.
Yeah.
So that's why I say, it basically comes down to support, you know, offering this committee supports exploring a managed vendor program.
Okay. So, that's the motion then. Is-
Do we wanna restate that?
Explore and manage, beach management program to the regional beach accesses and RBAs, and to be heard at the next committee meeting.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
And the RBAs, are those the one over the
Regional
100
beach.
feet?
The regional beach
Well, she
access
said
is-
regional
or
backs-
Public beach access is greater than 100 feet.
And then, yeah, okay. I just want to be clear that it's not just the 8 designated ones now, but those other,
Yeah.
how many more are there that have 100 feet or more?
Well, there's areas in Sea Highland and Sea Grove, Gulfview Heights, Bryce Regional Beach Access. So it's mainly those two beaches there. There is some area down in Dune Allen that's more than 100 feet associated with Fort Panic to the east.
Oh, okay. I
Uh,
was just curious. I thought there were only 2 or 3 listed of the kind I meant.
Drayton Beach is not a regional access, correct?
No, it's a
No, it's
neighborhood
not.
beach access, but it has has greater than 100 feet.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It's unanimous.
Okay.
Now, can I make a second motion on that? It's different, but this one is more geared toward 2019. If we do not come up with an implemented plan that helps alleviate some of these issues, okay? So can I make a motion with that condition?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, what I'd like to make a motion for is that if we do not come up with a managed plan that can be implemented for 2019, then I move that we change the way the setups are done on the regional beach accesses and the 100-foot or more ones, so that the vendor chairs and umbrellas are in the middle, and that the third of the beach closest to the water is for the public who brings their own chairs and things. And that the tents remain on the back third, the landward third. The middle section is for the vendors, and the front section, there's the water, is for the public who brings their own stuff.
You kind of divide the vendors, separate the vendors from the public, and the vendors are the public. I mean, the public's using the vendor chairs.
But if we
So
do,
those public that's
Well,
renting
do
the
you want a
chair can't
second?
go up to the,
You only have a second. No, I'm not seconding.
No.
No.
No, I said chairman counts.
I
no,
think we need to take it one step at a time.
okay.
No.
So in other words, if we don't do something, 2019 is going to have exactly the same complaints.
Well, you could make a motion at our next meeting when we formulate the plan that you wanted to do that, right?
Right.
That would be one of the three.
Well, I mean, if you object to
Sure.
that now, you're
Yes, ma'am.
probably still, but I can always make another motion at that meeting if we don't come up with anything and see if people are more amenable. I just think that we already know that you get complaints and complaints and complaints about the fact that the vendor setups are sitting there unoccupied for hours, if not sometimes whole days. And basically, by doing nothing at all, we're just leaving it for more of the same. So that's just, I'm just trying to come up with some ways that something is
So you wanna-
workable
you
if
wanna
we don't
repeat
have a
your motion?
management. Yeah, it just, that if we are unable to come up with a managed beach plan that, at our next meeting, that resolves some of the empty chair issues, that we put the vendor chair setups in the middle, along the middle third of the beach, and leave the third of the beach closest to the water line for the general public. Because this is assuming we don't have a first come, first served. This is assuming we don't have specific vendors. This is strictly assuming that we don't have any
should we
difference
wait
from
till
today.
next meeting to make that motion?
Well, and
or-
I'm fine with that. I can make it just as well
It's
then
kind of
as now.
hypothetical now.
Yeah, this one's more a backup motion than it
Yeah.
is a,
So
it's a
you made the
backup.
motion, do we have a second?
Do we want a second? Anybody?
That's okay.
No second,
Oh,
okay.
Okay,
We'll wait till next.
Go for that
we'll
one.
let that one die.
You withdraw the motion.
Okay, next one is tents. And then there's two components to it, public and then private. And then, so the public side of it would be to ban them for vending and for general public. That was the discussion we had. For the private, it would be ban them except allow them by annual permit.
I make that motion.
Okay, so the motion's to ban
The
tents on private property
It's a,
without an annual permit.
ban tents universally, allow them on private property by beach permit.
Or special event permit,
Yeah. So-
like your
Yeah,
scenario. And with a provision that we can accommodate some way or another, disability.
Be sure that the, permitting process has a disability component.
As a what?
I think, in my opinion, we need to leave it as is. They just changed it last year. And I think it needs to ride and see how it carries for a couple of years before we change it again. I remember I got a lot of complaints and it didn't even affect me, because our parks don't deal with that, but I still get a lot of phone calls about things that happen on the county and private beaches. And so my advice is, right now is just to say, leave it as is.
We beat it around pretty good last year, and it's pretty much the same as it was, so I don't know.
Okay.
We can make a motion and
Well, I made a motion, but I mean,
And I second it too.
Okay.
That's why I discussed.
I think you're gonna have a hard time getting it passed because the argument is going to be,
It's fresh.
there is no sun protection.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well,
that's
they
what-
can still use umbrellas. So why would you think, I mean,
Because that was the argument last time they tried to do it.
their
And in Bay County, that was the huge problem is that you're not protecting you're not allowing the public to protect themselves from the sun.
And most
Dave
of
made
them,
a pretty good argument too, that we'll just have more umbrellas out there that
Yeah.
we're already complaining
I
about.
would rather see the umbrellas, but.
Same here.
Okay, so you have a motion, do you have a second?
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed?
okay.
Okay. Next one is water-based sports, and to include CPR, also to include paddleboard rentals and the definition of water-based sports.
Let's just change it to water-based activities instead of
Water-
water-based sports, because it is
That would-
defined, water-based
Yes, it is.
activities is defined.
Okay. And under the definition of water-based activities, it does not include paddleboard, so I would,
Oh, I thought it
It's
did.
got canoes and kayaks, does
I
not
thought
say
it said
paddleboard.
paddleboards. Maybe we both read it wrong.
Well, can't we just include it then?
Water trampolines. Everything but a
What page are
paddleboard.
you on?
so water-based
It's,
activities.
5 of 32.
Well, the good news is it says includes but not limited to, but
Yeah.
yeah, paddle boards are biggie, so.
We could include paddleboards in the water-based.
Yeah,
I agree. Might as well put it in there.
Yep.
And then,
Well-
That's
so-
not something we need to vote on, is it?
No.
That's kind of clerical.
it's
Well,
just,
and actually, it doesn't have surfboards either, and paddle boards and surfboards are pretty similar, aren't
well,
they?
Yeah.
surfboards are actually different, aren't they considered
Mhm.
an extension of your lifeguard? Don't they have special, people surf?
they do, they're
professional
allowed to
surfers?
swim on a
double red flags.
Yeah,
For
so
the
they
exemption.
already have an exemption, so I
Okay.
don't think anybody should be required to have a CPR certificate for a
So
surfboard.
this is people that are vending,
Yeah.
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
for
there's
people
not
that
too
are
many people
Yeah.
vending surfboard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
not yet.
sorry.
So I think we're good, we don't need to vote on that. All
So
right,
that's
so
just
that,
a housekeeping issue, is it?
pardon me?
Is that a housekeeping issue, or do we need to make?
It's a
motion?
housekeeping issue.
Okay.
Okay, so that concludes our items we talked about. And unless there's any other business you want to take care of today?
How about a brief update on some beach accesses?
Oh, okay. So our Dune Allen access and across from Stinkies, we're getting very close to, to do the invitation to bid for construction. We expect to start that here in October. Be done, our goal is to be done before next summer, hopefully, early May. The Amalfi Coast, or the Miramar Beach one across from Amalfi Coast, received conceptual approval in May. We're moving forward in design development. We have a couple of planning, land use change, and a variance request for the front setback. Those are both scheduled for late September, early October. We should have 30% design plans ready for approval by the Board County Commission probably 1st of November. And then we'll proceed on through 90% and hopefully have that one bid out for construction probably in April or May. So it will not be constructed before next summer. It'll be constructed during the summer, open up in late fall, early winter. New Regional Beach Access in Seagrove, we received the conceptual design approval on that. We're now moving forward with the preliminary FDEP permitting activities. So on that one, we have some wetlands that we have to mitigate, so it adds an extra step with FDEP permitting. We don't anticipate having too many issues with that wetland mitigation because we're within a wetland mitigation bank area. And so it should be a fairly easy, when I say easy, it won't be as hard as trying to mitigate and having to use, other properties outside of the bank area. That one will not require any variances. It will require a land use change. We'll schedule that here shortly. What we do is we change it from its current designation of whatever it is to Parks and Recreation. It's a requirement when you're doing a park like that. Almost all of the neighborhood and regional beach accesses that exist have completed their design and permitting process, and we're starting to bid those out. So we have about 8 of them that we're bidding out. Invitation to bid advertisement should go out this week, and it's about a 3 or 4 week invitation to bid notice, and then we have about a 3-week bid time. And so we'll start those in the so-called off-season, and they'll be spaced out so that it doesn't affect any one community. But the first ones will be Inlet Beach and Fort Panic, and then there's a couple of the small regional or neighborhood beach accesses in the Seagrove area. We also are doing the improvements to Wall Street, which includes some stormwater, and to Nightcap, which includes some stormwater. And then there's a couple of them in further going east in Seagrove. And so those are what we call our facelifts. And we as the rest of those permits come in, we'll seek approval from the county commission to bid those out. And in our approval process for bidding them out, we request that we have the ability to bid them out as lots or as individuals. And the reason is so we can, once again, not affect any one community, and we can have some flexibility in how we do it. So within 2 years, we'll have all of our beach accesses rebuilt to the new standard, which is nominal 5.5 foot wide, the composite deck boards, standardized handrails. Of course, all of the feet or the bottom portion, their elevations will be adjusted to meet the current beach condition. As you know, a lot of those are now buried. Structure replaced as required. And so that's it on beach accesses. The wooden bridges at Deer Lake and at Eastern Lake are going out for bid for construction. We'll do those in the so-called off-season. The one at Deer Lake is actually getting a metal span. So we're looking at some different procurement ways to not take that bridge down for a long period of time. Whenever we do something on the multi-use path, it makes it hard because we don't have too many alternatives to redirect people. That in our capital improvement projects, we have some more multi-use path coming up, but it will be done in conjunction with some public works projects for stormwater, and those will be starting at 395 and headed east towards Eastern Lake. And there's a couple of sections that will be done in conjunction with new stormwater for 30A that will actually be going in underneath the bike path. They'll include stormwater for the new bike path. There'll be some right-of-way encroachment, take back, and new 10-foot wide path and good delineation between the road and the path and all that.
Very
Yes,
good.
ma'am.
Have you established approximately how long it takes from when you purchase a property until you can begin construction?
Takes
Because
about
the
a-
public doesn't understand at all why it
Yeah,
takes so long.
At a minimum, it takes about a year from when we decide to, from when we actually purchase the property. When we take possession of the property by title, it takes about a year minimum. Often it takes longer than that, depending on what challenges we get for those various components of the permitting, which is land use change, variances, if we want to seek a variance, and there's a couple of different variances we may seek. Just front setback, scenic corridor setbacks. We don't often ask for that, but only reason we would is if we were compromised by FDP permitting with Coastal Construction Conservation Line, where they don't want us going down on the beach.
Is that why you got the variance on the Malfi one?
Yeah, right, so
Yeah.
the existing structure there is already within that setback, and so we don't think it's inappropriate to ask for a setback variance to put our new restroom building. The one at Dune Allen, we are originally at, we're gonna seek a scenic corridor buffer setback. After some thought processes on that, we said, we as the county shouldn't be asking to do things that we don't allow other people to do. And so we pulled back on that one. The one at Seagrove is not gonna require it. We've already designed it, because it also has a scenic corridor, buffer zone. So we initially, we said, no, we're not even gonna consider it. One of the reasons is, of course, we can get more parking in there because we put our bathhouses out by the road now for a couple of different reasons, but, so one at Seagrove, all we're doing is a land use change. The wetland mitigations, there are a lot of unknowns as to how that process will go. One thing that has increased some of the length is we were using a practice of dealing with the FDEP that we're not gonna use anymore. And that practice is that we would meet with them on a preliminary basis to kind of get their idea of what they would allow, okay? Because they asked for that, and some of our engineers said that that's a good way to go. I've now discovered that that's not a good way to go, mainly because they'll shake their head, sometimes up and down, sometimes they'll just look at you and say, we may consider that. And then we go through an effort, and then we get there with the application, and they say, well, we're not gonna allow this, or we need more information on that, or they argue that, you know, why you don't need 8 tip pilings versus 6-inch tip pilings. And so now our practice is that we're gonna formulate what we want, and we're gonna make an application. Because they have certain time periods that they have to react to you within. And I think that's gonna cut down the process.
I
Time.
hope so. But do you think it's fair to say that certainly for a completed project is probably 2 years?
2 years, yes.
Yeah, because I think setting expectations will
Public
help.
sentiment has
Yeah.
a lot to do with that too.
Yeah.
I remember the inlet beach access, we probably fought that one for 4, 5, 6 years because the
That's
neighbors
what I'm
didn't want it.
saying. You know, you know, originally, the Dune Outland, we were challenged before we even bought the property. We were challenged after we bought the property, as to we couldn't use it for this or that. And, so, you know, we understand that people don't want Pope Beach or people want Pope Beach access, and they just don't want it next to their house. And, so,
Well, true.
But yeah, so yes, 2 years would be an accurate, you know, assessment of time pending any, large issues that have to be dealt with.
Yeah.
So large issues could be, you know, wetland mitigation. We never know who's gonna challenge us on whatever fronts.
Sure. Well, and the DEP just takes a long time, even when you're, you know, trying to do everything right.
Yeah,
It's,
I mean, we actually redesigned the boardwalk 3 times on the Dune Allen project. And that was after receiving what we considered a favorable nod
mhm.
on what we wanted to do. And so a couple of things I'm doing on boardwalks now is creating platforms for handicapped people to be able to experience the beach without having to go down onto the beach. And so that's a large platform at the top, where you have a switchback, you know, a larger than what would be considered a normal platform, so that they have a way of getting down into the dune system and getting out of the way of flow of pedestrian traffic. And so those were 2 favorable nods we got. And lo and behold, when the application went in, Mr. Governor, we're not gonna allow that. And so very frustrating, because I think that they're both good ideas, and I think that their idea of, you know, FDEP has what I call a minimalist attitude on boardwalks, but they want you to build just what you need to build.
Yeah.
to
It's
get
all
there.
about the debris.
Yeah.
What's that, and the dune grasses, and the little beach mice, and the, you know, everything else that takes precedent over, you know, humans, so.
Yeah, don't get me started on that one.
Okay.
All right, anything else? Okay, let's adjourn.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate y'all's time.